Hello, I am the Wizard of Tales, and I'm here to guide you today. I know this video is the perfect companion to help my dear dreamers relax and drift off to sleep. Before we dive into a world of calm and serenity, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Now, get cozy, take a deep breath, and let the magic of stories embrace you. In the crystalline depths of the ocean, where the sunlight danced in shades of blue and emerald across the waters, there was a majestic kingdom ruled by the mighty King Triton. His long silver hair waved with the sea currents, and his golden trident shone with the same intensity as his wise eyes. Among her 7 daughters, Marina the youngest was considered the most beautiful and mysterious of all. Marina had a voice that made the corals vibrate and the fish stop to listen. Her red hair floated like submerged flames, and her green eyes carried a curious gleam that reflected her restless soul. Unlike her sisters, who were content with the wonders of the underwater world, Marina dreamed of something more, something beyond the surface that intrigued her so much. In the palace of coral and pearls, Marina spent hours contemplating her secret treasure, a small cave full of objects recovered from shipwrecks, porcelain plates, silverware watches that had stood the test of time, and books with pages stained by salt water made up her private collection. Her best friend, Sebastian, a cautious red crab, always accompanied her on her explorations, even though he constantly tried to dissuade her from her fascination with the human world. Princess Marina, you know your father wouldn't approve of this, Sebastian would say, walking sideways over a coral shelf. The world above is dangerous for us sea creatures. But Marina just smiled, twirling a fork between her delicate fingers. How can something that creates such interesting objects be dangerous, Sebastian? Look at that. Humans call it a fork and use it to eat. Isn't it fascinating? The young mermaid knew that her 15th birthday was just around the corner, the age at which mermaids were allowed to surface for the first time. Her older sisters had already made the journey, and each had come back with stories that fed her curiosity even more. Stories about birds flying against the blue sky, about ships cutting through the waves like wooden giants, and about humans dancing under the stars. On a particularly stormy night, when the sea currents were stronger than usual, Marina noticed an unusual movement in the waters above. A majestic ship was cutting through the waves, and colored lights were exploding in the dark sky. Unable to contain her curiosity, she swam to the surface, ignoring Sebastian's desperate protests. As she surfaced, her heart raced at the most breathtaking sight she had ever seen. The ship was even bigger than she had imagined, decorated with colorful flags that danced in the wind. Music and laughter echoed through the air, and Marina approached, silently hiding behind one of the ship's large wheels. It was then that she saw him for the first time, a young prince with black hair and a gentle smile was dancing on deck surrounded by sailors and courtiers. His name was Eric, as Marina discovered from listening to the conversations above. There was something in his blue eyes that captivated her instantly, a kindness and vivacity that made her completely forget the world around her. But the happiness of that moment was brutally interrupted when dark clouds covered the stars and lightning cut through the sky. In a matter of minutes, A violent storm formed, turning the sea into a furious monster that shook the ship as if it were a toy. Marina watched in horror as the giant waves battered the ship. The sailors fought bravely against the fury of the sea, but it was a losing battle. Lightning struck the main mast, and flames began to devour the ship. In the midst of the chaos, Marina saw Prince Eric trying to help his crew, but a particularly strong wave threw him overboard. Without hesitation, she dived in after him. The waters were murky and choppy, but her mermaid eyes could see clearly through the darkness. She found the prince, unconscious and sinking fast. With all her strength, she swam to him and wrapped her arms around him, fighting against the currents to bring him to the surface. The coast was not far away, but every moment was precious. Marina swam with determination, keeping the prince's face above water, singing softly to him an ancient melody of her people. When she finally reached the shore, the sky was beginning to lighten and the storm was diminishing in strength. She laid the prince gently on the sand, watching his pale face with concern. He was still breathing, but unconscious. Marina stroked his face with trembling fingers, feeling something awaken in her heart that she had never felt before. "Please live," she whispered, her melodious voice laden with emotion. "You have to live." The sound of approaching voices forced her back to the sea, but her eyes remained fixed on the figure of the prince until a young woman found him on the beach. Marina dived into the deep waters with a heart heavy with love and worry, knowing that her life would never be the same again. Back at the underwater palace, she ignored Sebastian's sermons about the danger she had been in. Her thoughts were fixed on Prince Eric, his gentle smile, and the moments she held him in her arms. It was then that she made a decision that would change her destiny forever. She would find a way to be part of his world, no matter what the price. In the darkness of her coral room, Marina began to map out her plan, still unaware of the high price that fate would charge for her dream of love. In the shadows of the ocean depths, the sea witch watched through her magical eyes, smiling mischievously as she waited for the young mermaid to take the first step towards her transformative destiny. In the days that followed Prince Eric's rescue, Marina became more distant and dreamy than ever. She would spend hours near the surface, hiding behind rocks near the beach, where she had left him, hoping to catch a glimpse of him walking along the sand. Her sisters noticed the change in her behavior, and concern began to spread throughout the underwater palace. "Marina is different," commented Pearl, the eldest of the sisters, during a family dinner. "She hardly touches her food and spends her days sighing in the corners." King Triton watched his youngest daughter with growing concern. He knew that distant look, well, the same one their mother had when she fell in love with him years ago. However, love between a mermaid and a human was something forbidden, too dangerous to even consider. One afternoon, while watching the prince from her usual position, Marina was surprised by Flounder, a little yellow fish, who was her childhood friend. "Marina, you can't go on like this," he said worriedly. "You're hurting yourself more and more." "I can't help it, Flounder," she replied, her green eyes fixed on Eric's distant figure. "Every time I see him, my heart seems to want to jump out of my chest. I need to find a way to be part of his world." It was then that Marina began to hear stories about Ursula, the sea witch, whispers among the ocean currents spoke of her power to make impossible wishes come true for a price. Living in a cave in the darkest parts of the ocean, Ursula was feared by everyone, including King Triton himself. Sebastian, sensing Marina's thoughts, tried to intervene. Princess, please get these thoughts out of your head. Ursula is dangerous. She destroys lives. But Marina had already made up her mind. One moonless night, while the palace slept, she quietly slipped out of her room. Sebastian and Flounder, who were watching her, tried to stop her, but her determination was greater than any warning. The path to Ursula's cave was dark and frightening. Deformed sea creatures, former victims of the witch, writhed on the seabed, their eyes glowing with silent warnings. Marina swam through them, her heart beating hard against her chest. The entrance to the cave looked like the mouth of a sea monster, with rock formations resembling pointed teeth. Two eels, Flotsam and Jetsam, glided around them, their yellow eyes twinkling mischievously. Welcome, little princess. Their voices echoed in unison. The lady has been waiting for you. Inside the cave, Ursula emerged from the shadows. Half woman, half octopus, she had a sinister beauty that mesmerized. Her white hair floated like tentacles around her face, and a calculating smile played on her purple lips. I know exactly why you're here, dear, said Ursula, her honeyed voice echoing off the cave walls. You want to join your beloved prince in the surface world. Marina nodded, trying to hide her fear. Yes, that's what I want, more than anything. Well, that can be arranged, replied Ursula, swimming over to a large cauldron. I can turn your tail into human legs, but the price will be high. You'll have to give me your voice. My voice? Marina asked, putting her hand to her throat. Exactly. And there are more conditions. The witch continued her tentacles, moving sinuously. Every step you take will be like stepping on sharp needles. You'll have 3 days to make the prince fall in love with you and give you a kiss of true love. If you fail at sunrise, on the 4th day, you'll turn into sea foam. Marina hesitated for a moment, thinking about the consequences. How could she make Eric fall in love with her without her voice? How could she bear the pain at every step? But the image of the prince, his gentle smile and kind eyes strengthened her resolve. I accept, she said firmly. Ursula smiled, revealing pointed teeth. With a gesture, she made a golden contract appear. Then sign here, dear. Marina took the offered quill, and with trembling hands signed her name. Immediately, a magical whirlwind enveloped her. Ursula began to sing an ancient and sinister song, her hands weaving complex spells in the air. A golden light came out of Marina's throat, her voice materializing in the shape of a small, glowing sphere. Ursula captured it in a shell necklace that she hung around her own neck. At the same moment, a sharp pain shot through Marina's body, her tail splitting into 2 human legs. Unable to breathe underwater with her new human lungs, Marina began to struggle desperately. Flounder and Sebastian, who had followed their friend there, rushed to help her, bringing her quickly to the surface. When they emerged, the sun was rising over the horizon, painting the sky pink and gold. Marina was taken to the same beach where she had saved Eric, her body trembling at the new sensation of the waves against her human skin. Every movement was torture, as Ursula had warned, but in her heart, a burning hope burned. Lying on the sand, watching the sun rise, Marina knew that her real journey had only just begun. 3 days to win Eric's love. 3 days to fulfill her dream or face a tragic fate. The clock was ticking, and with it, the biggest challenge of her life. The sun was already up when Marina heard voices approaching from the beach. Sebastian and Flounder quickly dived into the waves, leaving her alone on the sand. With difficulty, she sat up using pieces of a torn sail she found on the beach to cover her body. Every movement was an indescribable torture, as if thousands of needles were piercing her newly formed feet. It was then that she recognized him. Eric was walking along the beach, accompanied by his faithful dog, Max and Grimsby, his royal advisor. Marina's heart raced when their gazes met. Eric ran towards her, genuinely worried about the mysterious young woman he had met. "Are you all right? What happened?" he asked, taking off his coat and putting it over her shoulders. Marina tried to answer, but no sound came from her throat. She put her hand to her throat, remembering the price she had paid. "She seems to have been shipwrecked, Your Highness," observed Grimsby, "and she's apparently lost her voice." Eric helped Marina to her feet, supporting her as her legs shook with the stabbing pain. "Let's get you to the palace. You need medical attention and proper clothing." At the castle, Marina was met by Carlotta, the housekeeper, who helped her with a hot bath and dressed her in a beautiful blue dress. While her skilled hands combed Marina's long red hair, Carlotta chattered happily about the prince and his search for the mysterious young woman who had saved him during the storm. "He talks of nothing but this girl with the most beautiful voice he's ever heard," Carlotta commented, not noticing how Marina paled at her words. "He's determined to find her and make her his wife." During dinner that night, Marina made an effort to behave like a lady of the surface, carefully observing how the others used the cutlery, the forks that fascinated her so much in her underwater collection. Eric couldn't take his eyes off her, enchanted by her natural grace and genuine curiosity about everything around her. "You remind me of someone," he said, studying her face. "Your eyes have something familiar about them." Marina smiled, wishing desperately that she could tell him the truth, that she was the one who had saved him. Over the next few days, Eric dedicated himself to showing Marina his kingdom. Despite the constant pain in her feet, she accompanied him at all times, amazed at each new discovery of the human world. They took carriage rides through the city, danced in the market to the sound of street musicians, even if every step was agony, and shared quiet moments in the palace gardens. Sebastian and Flounder watched them discreetly from the shore, hoping that Marina would manage to win the prince's love before it was too late. The crab even organized a choir of sea creatures to create a romantic atmosphere during a boat trip, but his efforts were interrupted by noisy seagulls. On a particularly beautiful afternoon, Eric took Marina for a boat trip on the lagoon. The sun was setting over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded Marina of her home in the deep. Eric rowed gently, his eyes fixed on her. "You know," he began, "since you came along, something has changed in me. It's as if, like I've been waiting for you without knowing it." Marina felt her heart race at these words. Eric leaned towards her, their faces ever closer. But before their lips could touch the boat, rocked violently, almost capsizing. Two familiar figures slid into the dark waters, Flotsam and Jetsam Ursula's eels, who had been sent to make sure Marina failed in her mission. The moment was broken, and Eric quickly rowed back to the shore, concerned for Marina's safety. As they walked back to the castle, he held her hand affectionately, but something in his gaze had changed a shadow of doubt or worry that hadn't been there before. That night, alone in her room, Marina watched the stars through the window, thinking of her family in the depths of the ocean. King Triton had noticed their disappearance and ordered searches throughout the underwater kingdom. Her sisters swam tirelessly, calling out to her, their worried voices echoing through the waters. From his lookout post on the beach, Sebastian watched the castle with apprehension. Time was running out fast. Marina had just one more day to get the kiss of true love. Ursula's words echoed in his mind like a dark omen. If you fail at sunrise on the fourth day, you will turn into sea foam. In the darkness of her cave, Ursula watched everything through her crystal ball, a mischievous smile on her purple lips. Soon, very soon, she murmured, stroking the necklace that held Marina's voice. Triton's daughter will be mine, and then the kingdom of the sea itself will fall into my hands. Marina's fate hung by a thread balanced between Eric's growing love and the relentless time that was running against her. The stars shone in the night sky as silent witnesses to her dilemma, while the sea whispered ancient melodies of love and loss in the dark depths. The next morning, a commotion swept through the castle. A mysterious young woman had arrived on the beach, her melodious voice echoing through the halls of the palace. Eric, upon hearing that familiar song, ran towards her as if bewitched. Marina watched from her bedroom window, her heart clenching, as she recognized her own voice coming from the stranger's lips. It was Vanessa, actually Ursula, in disguise, wearing the necklace that contained Marina's stolen voice. Her long black hair and violet dress contrasted with her pale skin, and her eyes sparkled with a malice that only Marina seemed to notice. "It's her," exclaimed Eric, amazed. "The voice I've been looking for so long. The girl who saved me from shipwreck." Marina tried desperately to get his attention, to make him realize the mistake. But without her voice, her gestures just looked like the expression of a jealous young woman. Grimsby, impressed by the developments, immediately began preparations for a royal wedding. "The wedding will take place tomorrow, at sunset on the royal ship," he announced, while Vanessa smiled triumphantly, her necklace glinting subtly in the daylight. Sebastian and Flounder watched in horror from the beach. "We need to do something," exclaimed the little fish, swimming nervously in circles. "That witch is fooling everyone." Marina spent the rest of the day following Eric and Vanessa around the castle, her heart breaking every time she saw him smile at the impostor. The pain in her feet seemed insignificant compared to the agony in her chest. When night came, she took refuge in the palace gardens, letting her silent tears fall into the sea. It was then that Scuttle, a seagull, who was always in the way, but Marina's loyal friend, came flying in. "Marina, Marina, you won't believe what I've seen." The seagull began to tell how she had witnessed Vanessa in her bedroom, her true sea witch form revealed in a mirror, as she laughed and plotted her revenge on King Triton. With this revelation, a plan began to form. Sebastian dived into the depths to warn King Triton, while Flounder rounded up all the sea creatures he could find. Scuttle flew in to mobilize his fellow gulls and other seabirds. The morning of the wedding arrived with a surprisingly clear sky. The royal ship was magnificently decorated with flowers and ribbons, and guests from all over the kingdom arrived to celebrate. Marina, dressed in a simple pink dress, watched the preparations with a heavy heart, knowing that at sunset her fate would be sealed. When the ceremony began, Vanessa walked the deck of the ship like a true queen, her white wedding dress trailing behind her. Eric seemed to be in a kind of trance, his eyes glazed over and an empty smile on his face. Suddenly, the sky was filled with dozens of seabirds. Seagulls dived towards Vanessa, tugging at her hair and dress. Dolphins and seals shook the ship, while crabs and starfish climbed up the hull, creating controlled chaos. In the midst of the confusion, Vanessa's necklace broke, releasing Marina's voice in a golden sphere that floated back to its true owner. The moment the voice returned to her throat, Marina began to sing, and Eric finally awoke from the spell. "It was you," he exclaimed, running towards her. "You saved me that night." But before they could get any closer, the sun began to set over the horizon. Vanessa now revealed, as Ursula let out a terrible laugh that echoed across the sea. "Too late, little princess." Marina felt a sharp pain run through her body as her legs began to transform back into a mermaid's tail. Ursula, regaining her true form, grabbed Marina with her tentacles and dived into the sea, dragging her with her. "Marina!" shouted Eric, without hesitating to dive in after them. In the depths, King Triton appeared, his trident glowing menacingly. "Ursula, free my daughter." "Oh, but we have a contract, Triton dear," replied the sea witch, displaying the golden parchment with Marina's signature. Unless what?" asked the king, his voice trembling slightly. "Unless you want to take her place," suggested Ursula, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Her crown for her life. What do you say, your majesty?" Marina tried to protest, but Ursula's tentacles held her firmly in place. Above them, Eric swam desperately, looking for a way to help, while Sebastian and Flounder tried to guide him through the dark waters. King Triton looked at his youngest daughter, seeing in her the same unconditional love that her mother had shown years ago. With a flick of his trident, he pointed to the contract, turning Marina's signature into his own. "No, Dad," cried Marina, but it was too late. A magical whirlwind enveloped King Triton, and within seconds, he had transformed into a small sea creature, another of Ursula's many imprisoned souls. The sea witch grabbed the crown and trident, her power growing exponentially as she laughed maniacally. "The kingdom of the sea is finally mine." Marina floated in shock, watching her transformed father, while Eric continued to swim towards her. The darkness of the deep seemed to swallow up all hope, but in his eyes shone a fierce determination. The battle for the kingdom of the sea had only just begun, and Marina knew she would need all her courage and Eric's love to face what lay ahead. Ursula grew in size and power, Triton's trident amplifying her dark magic as she rose from the depths of the ocean. The surface of the sea began to bubble violently, and a storm formed in the sky, with lightning cutting through the dark clouds. Marina, seeing her father transformed into a helpless little sea creature, felt an unknown force grow inside her. Eric, who was still swimming nearby, finally managed to reach her. Their eyes met in the midst of the chaos, and in that moment, they both knew what they needed to do. "The necklace!" shouted Sebastian, swimming frantically around them. "The necklace she wore before still has some of the original magic." Marina dived towards the wreckage of the ship, where she had first met Eric, with him following close behind. Among the debris, the necklace glowed faintly, still bearing traces of Ursula's original spell. Meanwhile, above them, the sea witch was using her trident to create a gigantic whirlpool, bringing shipwrecks up from the depths. "Poor unfortunate souls," thundered Ursula, her voice echoing across the ocean. "Behold your new queen." Marina reached for the necklace, just as one of the resurfaced ships almost crushed them. Eric, displaying extraordinary courage, swam through the floating wreckage, grabbing a broken spear from one of the figureheads. Marina's sisters emerged from the turbulent waves, bringing with them an army of sea creatures. Even mermaids and tritons from distant kingdoms came to their aid, recognizing the threat Ursula posed to all the oceans. "We need to take the trident from her," shouted Marina to Eric, her voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. Flounder and Sebastian coordinated a diversionary attack, leading schools of fish that swam in formation, confusing the sea witch's vision. The seagulls, led by Scuttle, plunged from the sky like arrows, striking Ursula in the face. Eric, taking advantage of the distraction, swam over to one of the resurfaced ships and began to climb its sloping hull. Marina followed her tail, providing enough momentum to keep up with him. The necklace around her neck began to glow more brightly as they approached Ursula. "Insignificant insects!" roared the witch, shooting lightning bolts from her trident in all directions. One of them hit the ship, where Eric and Marina were causing it to tilt dangerously. It was then that Marina realized what she needed to do. Concentrating on the love she felt for Eric, for her father, for her family, and for the ocean itself, she began to sing, her voice amplified by the residual magic of the necklace, created a harmony that made the waters vibrate. The souls imprisoned by Ursula, including King Triton, began to resonate with Marina's melody. The sea witch felt her power falter, the trident trembling in her hands. Eric, seeing his chance, threw the spear with all his might, hitting Ursula's arm and causing her to drop the trident. Marina dived to catch it, but Ursula was quicker, grabbing her with her tentacles. "Did you really think you could beat me, little princess?" At that crucial moment, Eric leapt from the ship, grabbing the trident before it sank into the depths. With one swift movement, he threw it towards Marina, who managed to free herself from Ursula's tentacles, using her tail as leverage. Holding her father's trident, Marina felt its power flow through her. The music in her heart turned into pure energy, and with a cry that mixed pain and determination, she pointed the trident at Ursula. A ray of golden light pierced the sea witch's chest. Ursula began to fall apart, her gigantic body turning into dark foam that dissipated into the waves. With her destruction, all her curses were broken. The imprisoned souls returned to their original forms, including King Triton, who regained his crown and majestic appearance. The storm began to calm down, and the sun broke through the clouds. Marina swam over to Eric, who was floating exhausted on the surface. Her father watched them, finally understanding the depth of the love between them. "Marina, my daughter," said King Triton, his voice gentle. You have shown more courage and true love than I ever imagined possible. With a flick of his trident, which Marina returned respectfully, he created an arc of golden light that enveloped his youngest daughter. Marina felt a familiar tingle run through her body, but this time there was no pain, just a warm sensation of transformation. Go ahead, my little one, smiled Triton. Live your life with the one who won your heart. Marina looked at her legs human again, and then at Eric, who was smiling with tears in his eyes. They swam together to the beach, where they were greeted by a crowd who had witnessed the epic battle. The wedding was celebrated both on land and at sea. Sea creatures and humans gathered to witness the union that bridged the distance between two worlds. Marina, radiant in her white dress, could see her sisters smiling from the waves, while Sebastian led a choir of fish that sang joyfully. Eric and Marina built their castle by the sea with a staircase that went straight down to the water, allowing her to visit her family whenever she wished. Over time, they became a bridge between the two worlds, promoting peace and understanding between humans and sea creatures. At night, when the moon shone over the waves, Marina still sang the ancient melodies of her people, her voice carrying stories of love, courage, and sacrifice across the waters. And in every note, in every word, was the reminder that true love has the power to transcend any barrier, even those between land and sea. It was a radiant spring morning at Oak Farm, where the golden sun gently bathed the green fields, and the dew still sparkled on the leaves of the trees. In the quietest corner of the barn, next to the small geese pond, Mama Duck was carefully laying her precious eggs. Her nest, painstakingly made using soft straw and delicate feathers, housed 6 pearl-white eggs and a particularly large one with a slightly grayish tinge. Senora Patricia, as she was known among the farm animals, was an experienced and respected duck. Her light brown feathers were always well groomed, and her motherly manner made her a beloved figure to everyone. This would be her 3rd batch of chicks, and as always, she dedicated every moment of her days to protecting and warming her eggs, only leaving for quick meals at the nearby pond. The barn was a busy place, full of life and stories. There was Daisy Cow, always willing to offer unsolicited advice. Theodore the horse, who loved to tell stories of his racing days. And the gossip hens, an inseparable trio who knew everything that happened on the farm. High up in the rafters, Sabina, the owl, watched everyone with her wise golden eyes, rarely interfering, but always attentive. As the days went by, Senora Patricia's anxiety grew. She talked to her eggs, hummed old lullabies, and occasionally received visits from her best friend, Gertrude the duck, who lived on the other side of the lake. Darling, said Gertrude in her worried way, looking at the larger grayish egg, are you sure this is yours? It looks so different. Senora Patricia always defended all her eggs with equal fervor. Each child is unique, Gertrude, she replied firmly, smoothing her feathers over the eggs. The important thing is that they're all here warm and safe. The gossip hens, however, never missed an opportunity to speculate about the different egg. I heard it might be a goose egg, whispered Celestina, the oldest of the three, or maybe even a turkey, added Benedita, the middle one. Imagine the shame, added Clotilde, the youngest, waving her red crest in disapproval. On a particularly hot day when the sun was already high in the sky, Senora Patricia felt the first movements under her feathers. Her heart raced with excitement as she watched tiny cracks appear in the shells. One by one, the eggs began to break apart, revealing adorable yellow ducklings who immediately began to chirp and snuggle up to their mother. The last one to hatch was precisely the one from the largest grayish egg. The shell cracked with more difficulty, and when the chick finally emerged, a momentary silence overtook the barn. It was a considerably larger duckling than its siblings with a grayish fluff, instead of the traditional yellow longer legs, and a neck that seemed disproportionately long. "Oh dear," exclaimed Gertrude, who had arrived to meet the newborns. The gossiping hens immediately began their whispering, and even Daisy Cow, always so diplomatic, couldn't hold back a hum of surprise. Mrs. Patricia, however, showed no sign of rejection. She welcomed the different duckling, with the others covering him with the same love and care. "Come along, my little ones," she called sweetly. "Let's learn to swim." The next few days were a mixture of joy and worry. While the yellow ducklings swam with natural grace, the different duckling, although he could also swim very well, drew attention to his clumsy movements when walking. His longer legs occasionally tripped him up, and his larger size made him less agile on dry land. The other animals on the farm, especially the younger ones, began to make nasty comments. "Look at the way he walks," laughed the chicks. "He always looks like he's about to fall over," sneered the piglets. Even his own siblings, influenced by the environment, began to shy away from him during playtime. Sabina the owl, from her post in the rafters of the barn, watched everything with her keen eyes. One evening, when the different duckling was alone by the pond, she decided to come down from her perch for a chat. "You know," she began in her soft, deep voice, "sometimes being different isn't a curse, but a gift we haven't discovered yet." The duckling looked at her with his big, sad eyes. "But why did I have to be different? Why can't I be like my brothers?" The wise owl smoothed her feathers thoughtfully before replying, "Each creature has its own path to follow, little one. Time will reveal yours." With these enigmatic words, she flew off silently, leaving the duckling immersed in his thoughts. At night, while everyone was asleep, the different duckling would often sneak down to the edge of the lake to look at its reflection in the calm waters. In the moonlight, his distorted image seemed even stranger, and a deep feeling of not belonging began to grow in his heart. He loved his mother, and knew that she loved him too, but with each passing day, it became harder to bear the stares, whispers, and laughter of the other farm animals. It was on one of these lonely nights that he made a decision that would change his life forever. With a heavy heart, but determined, he decided that he needed to leave. Perhaps somewhere else he could find others like him, or at least a place where being different wouldn't be the cause of so much derision and loneliness. The next morning, before the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, the different duckling gathered all his courage. With silent steps, he approached his sleeping mother, and holding back tears, whispered one last, "Goodbye." Mrs. Patricia stirred slightly in her sleep, but did not wake up. while her little brothers continued to nestle little yellow balls of soft feathers. The morning dew dampened his feathers as he walked away from the barn, past the great oak that gave the farm its name. The cold dawn wind made his hair stand on end, but he walked on determined. As he got further away, the familiar sounds of the farm were fading into the background. The distant crowing of the rooster, the soft mooing of the cows, and even the whispering of the gossiping hens now seemed just a distant memory. His first stop was a small stream that meandered through a field of daisies. There he met some wild ducks who, to his surprise, didn't seem too interested in his different appearance. Around here, everyone is different in their own way, explained an elderly duck with white spots on its wings. The important thing is to know how to swim and find food. For a few days, the duckling stayed with the group of wild ducks, learning their customs and way of life. They taught him how to find the best grains and insects hidden among the aquatic plants, and how to dive deep to escape predators. For the first time since he could remember, he felt almost accepted. However, the peace was short-lived. One morning, Hunter's gunfire echoed through the air, scattering the group in all directions. In the midst of the chaos and panic, the different duckling flew as far as it could, its not yet fully developed wings struggling against the wind. When it finally landed, it was alone again in an unknown and dark swamp. The swamp was a very different place from the cozy farm he knew. The twisted trees cast strange shadows over the murky water, and mysterious sounds echoed in the darkness. It was there that he met two wild geese, eccentric creatures who amused themselves with their own incomprehensible jokes. "You're certainly the ugliest duck we've ever seen," said one of them, laughing. "But that can be an advantage around here. No one will want to hunt something so clumsy." The other goose added, "Why don't you join us? We're all a bit odd, really." Despite the rudeness of the comments, the duckling considered the offer. After all, these geese seemed to accept their difference even if it was in a peculiar way. But before he could reply, more shots cut through the air. "Run!" shouted one of the geese, but it was too late for them. The duckling dived quickly into the muddy water, its heart beating wildly as it heard the flapping of wings and the distant gunshots. When it emerged, it was alone again. The silence of the swamp now seemed even more oppressive, and a deep sadness took hold of his heart. He thought of his mother, of her warm and safe nest, and of Sabina, the owl's words. Had she made a mistake in leaving? The weeks turned into months, and the duckling continued its lonely journey. Summer began to give way to fall, and the leaves on the trees painted the world in shades of red and gold. He grew every day, his legs became stronger, and his neck longer, but his appearance continued to cause strangeness wherever he went. In a small pond surrounded by tall reeds, he met a group of frogs who were watching him curiously. "You don't look much like a duck," commented a wise old frog, scratching his wrinkled chin. "But you don't exactly look like a goose either. What are you anyway?" I don't know," replied the duckling, realizing for the first time that he really didn't know his true identity. This revelation deeply disturbed him, adding another layer of confusion to his already complicated existence. A family of field mice living near the pond tried to console him. The mother mouse in particular showed great compassion. "Darling," she said, offering him some seeds she had collected, "it doesn't matter what you are. What's important is what's in your heart." What's up? But even the kindness of the little rodents couldn't completely assuage his loneliness. At night, while the mice snuggled in their warm, safe burrows, the duckling slept alone among the reeds, dreaming of a place where he would finally belong. Autumn was fast approaching, and with it came the first signs of winter. The mornings dawned with a thin layer of frost covering the vegetation, and the wind became increasingly biting. The mice bid him a sad farewell, needing to retreat to their burrows for the coming winter. You need to find shelter, warned the mother mouse on her last visit. The winter here is too harsh to stay out in the open. But the duckling, still without a place to call home, decided to continue his journey, hoping to find a more welcoming place before the bitter cold arrived. So he left the pond of frogs and mice, carrying with him the memories of their brief friendship and the words of wisdom they had shared. As he flew over fields already yellowed by autumn, his heart still carried the hope of finding his true place in the world, even though the cold and loneliness increasingly threatened to freeze that flame of hope that still burned in his chest. The biting wind whipped the duckling's feathers as it sought shelter. Winter had arrived in full force, transforming the landscape into a hostile white blanket. The lakes and streams were beginning to freeze over, making it increasingly difficult to find food and drinking water. Mother Mouse's words of warning echoed in his mind as he struggled against the icy gusts. In his search for shelter, he found a small abandoned barn near a dense forest. The place was dilapidated with loose boards and gaps through which the wind whistled, but it still offered more protection than the outside environment. There he met an elderly sparrow who had also sought shelter from the blizzard. "You remind me of someone," said the sparrow, tilting his head to get a better look at the duckling. "A long time ago, I saw majestic creatures like you flying over the forest lake." Oh, the duckling was intrigued by the comment, but before he could ask more, the sparrow fell asleep, curled up in his corner of the barn. The nights were especially difficult. The cold penetrated through his feathers, and hunger tortured his stomach. To survive, he had to scrape the ice off the lakes in search of some submerged vegetation or look for seeds buried in the snow. His paws, once a source of shame because they were different, now helped him to walk better on the ice. One particularly frosty afternoon, while looking for food, the duckling heard a familiar sound, the flapping of wings. Looking up into the sky, he saw a group of large birds flying in formation. There was something about them that fascinated him, the gracefulness of their movements, their long necks, their snow-white feathers. For a moment, he felt an inexplicable connection with these distant creatures. The sparrow, who occasionally accompanied him in his search for food, noticed his interest. "They're swans," he explained, "the noblest birds I've ever met. They migrate south during the winter, where the lakes remain unfrozen." The duckling continued to watch until the swans disappeared over the horizon, carrying a piece of his heart with them. The days dragged on, each one bringing new challenges. One morning, while trying to break through the ice to get a drink of water, his paws got stuck in the frozen surface. The more he struggled, the harder it became to break free. Panic began to take hold of him, and his cries for help echoed through the freezing air. It was a family of deer that saved him. The mother deer, with her big gentle eyes, used her hooves to carefully break the ice around the duckling's feet. "You need to be more careful, little one," she warned. as her cubs looked on curiously. Winter can be treacherous for those who travel alone. The deer invited him to spend a few nights in a protected clearing where her family sheltered. There among the deer, the duckling found a brief moment of peace. The cubs didn't make fun of his appearance, and the mother deer always made sure he had some tender shoots to eat. "There's something noble about you," the deer said one night as they watched the stars through the treetops. "Something that goes beyond your current appearance. Have patience, little one. Spring always comes, bringing with it new beginnings." However, the tranquility was interrupted when hunters approached the clearing. The deer had to leave in a hurry, and the duckling found himself alone again. The winter seemed endless, and his strength diminished day by day. His feathers, once just different, were now always damp and heavy with frost. In his darkest moments, he wondered if he would survive to see spring. Sabina, the owl's words, seemed distant now, almost like a dream. Was it his destiny just to endure the cold and loneliness forever? One night, exhausted and almost frozen, the duckling found a small woodcutter's hut next to a frozen lake. Through the window, he could see the warm glow of a fireplace. An old woman lived there, with her cat and hen. Seeing the duckling's sorry state, she let him in. "Poor thing," she murmured, placing it near the fire. "You must be freezing." The cat and the hen watched him suspiciously, but the lady insisted that he stay at least until he recovered. The days in the hut were a mixture of comfort and discomfort. The warmth of the fireplace was welcome, but the cat constantly teased him, and the hen never missed an opportunity to comment on his strange appearance. "What kind of duck can't cluck properly?" she mocked. Even though the shelter and food were guaranteed, the duckling felt that something was missing. At night, looking out of the cabin window, he saw the frozen lake glistening in the moonlight. His heart yearned for something that even he didn't fully understand: a freedom, a purpose, an identity. It was during one of these nights of contemplation that he made his decision. Despite the kindness of the old lady, this was not his place. As soon as the first signs of spring began to appear, he would leave again. His journey was not yet over, and somewhere beyond the frozen horizon, his true destiny awaited him. The first signs of spring began to appear subtly. The ice covering the pond near the old lady's cottage was beginning to melt around the edges, and small green shoots were timidly emerging through the lingering snow. The duckling, which had grown considerably over the winter, felt an inexplicable stirring in its heart. One morning, while the lady slept and the cat hunted mice in the barn, the duckling approached the cottage window. The sun was rising differently now, more golden and welcoming, and flocks of birds were beginning to return from their long journeys south. It was then that he knew it was time to leave. He left the hut quietly, but not before placing a feather of his own next to the kind lady's armchair, as a silent thank you for her kindness during the hardest months of winter. The air was still cold, but there was a promise of warmth in the wind blowing from the south. His wings, now stronger after the winter's enforced rest, carried him over fields that were beginning to turn green. During the flight, he noticed that his body had changed significantly. It was bigger, stronger, and its movements in the air were more graceful than they had ever been. On his journey, he came across a small, partially thawed lake where he decided to land to rest. As he drank the water, He noticed his reflection in the crystal clear surface, and something caught his eye. Its feathers were no longer just gray. They were beginning to show a different sheen, almost silver in some parts. I noticed the change too, said a voice above him. It was the sparrow from the abandoned barn, coincidentally making his own way back to his summer territory. You're no longer that frightened little duckling I met in winter. There's something majestic emerging in you. The sparrow's words echoed in his mind as he continued his journey. Everywhere he went, he noticed that the other animals looked at him differently now. There was no longer mockery in their gazes, just a kind of curious admiration. In a flowery field, he came across a group of young rabbits who, instead of running away, frightened, approached him with interest. You look like those beautiful birds we saw flying the other day, exclaimed one of the bunnies, his eyes shining with excitement. What birds? Asked the duckling, his heart racing inexplicably. The big white ones with long necks, replied another bunny. They landed on the big lake beyond those hills. That information awakened something deep inside him. He remembered the majestic birds he had seen in winter, the comments of the elderly sparrow, and the enigmatic words of the Sabine owl so many months ago. Could it be? With new determination, he decided to head in the direction indicated by the bunnies. The flight over the hills was long, but his wings seemed tireless, driven by a force that went beyond the physical. When he finally caught sight of the great lake, his heart almost stopped. There they were, the same majestic birds he had seen during the winter, swans as the sparrow had called them. They floated gracefully over the blue waters, their long necks curving in elegant arcs, their white feathers glistening in the spring sunshine. With a mixture of awe and fascination, the duckling landed in the water at a safe distance from the group. His heart was beating so loudly that he feared it could be heard all along the lake shore. Then something extraordinary happened. One of the young swans swam towards him. There was no hostility in its movements, just a gentle curiosity. When it got closer, it tilted its head slightly, as if studying you. You must be new here, he said in a soft voice. Welcome to our pond. The duckling was stunned. There was no mockery, no rejection, just acceptance. Confused, he looked at his reflection in the water and for the first time really saw himself. Its feathers were no longer gray. They had turned a pure, brilliant white. Its neck, once awkwardly long, was now elegant and graceful. It was no longer a different duckling. It was a young swan. The words of the Sabine owl came back to his mind with crystal clarity. Sometimes being different is not a curse, but a gift we have yet to discover. Now, he finally understood. All the trials, all the loneliness, and all the suffering had been part of his journey of transformation. Other swans approached, welcoming him as one of their own. Among them was an older couple who watched him with a special twinkle in their eyes. We remember, said the female swan sweetly. One of our eggs was lost during a storm last spring. It must have rolled into a duck's nest. The revelation hit him like a ray of sunshine through dark clouds. His story, his origins, everything began to make sense. He wasn't an ugly duckling. He had always been a swan just waiting for his moment to blossom. As the spring days grew longer and warmer, The young swan learned more and more about his true nature from his new family. The older swans taught him the traditions of their people, such as flying in formation, finding the best places to feed, and building safe nests. However, amidst the joy of his discovery and new life, one lingering memory accompanied him: Lady Patricia, the duck, who had hatched him and loved him unconditionally, even when everyone else rejected him. At night, as he floated under the stars with his swan brothers, he thought about her and how she must have suffered from his sudden departure. You seem distant, observed his birth mother one morning as they swam together in the lake. Is something troubling you? The young swan hesitated for a moment before replying, I'm thinking of the duck that raised me. She loved me when no one else did, and I left without saying goodbye properly. The older swan gently touched her son's neck, a gesture of understanding between their species. True love manifests itself in many ways, she said wisely. Perhaps it's time to make peace with your past. So, one clear morning, the young swan decided it was time to return to Oak Farm. His biological parents and swan brothers understood his need and supported him in his decision. Sometimes, said his swan father, we need to go back to really move forward. The flight back was different from all his previous journeys. There was no longer any fear or uncertainty in his heart, just a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. His strong wings carried him confidently through the blue sky, and he could recognize the landmarks he had passed on his escape so many months ago. When he spotted the large oak tree that gave the farm its name, his heart raced. The farm seemed smaller than he remembered, but it still retained that welcoming atmosphere that had so comforted him in his early days. From his privileged height, he could see the barn, the small pond, and even the place where his old nest used to be. As he landed gracefully on the farm pond, he caused a stir among the animals. The gossiping hens, who were still the same, immediately began their excited whispering. A swan, a real swan on our farm, they exclaimed, without recognizing in him the duckling they had criticized so much. Daisy Cow, older and wiser, now approached the edge of the lake, watching him with her gentle eyes. There was a glint of recognition in her gaze, but she kept a discreet smile, allowing him to conduct his own return. It was then that he saw her, Mrs. Patricia, his adoptive mother, swimming calmly with a new group of ducklings. She was a little older, her feathers a little grayer, but her maternal bearing remained the same. The young swan swam towards her, its heart overflowing with emotion. Lady Patricia stopped as she saw him approaching, her eyes widening in recognition. Even transformed into a majestic swan, there was something in his eyes, in the way he moved, that a mother could never forget. My son, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Yes, Mamma, he replied softly. It's me. The little ducklings watched curiously as their mother approached the great white swan, gently touching its neck with her beak in a gesture of deep affection. Words were not needed to express all the love and longing contained in that moment. The news of his return spread quickly around the farm. Sabina the owl came down from her perch to see him, her golden eyes shining with satisfaction. I knew, she said simply, that you would find your way during that special day. The young swan shared with Lady Patricia all his adventures, the harsh winter the kindness of the lady of the cottage, and finally, the discovery of his true identity. She listened attentively, her motherly heart filling with pride at all the strength and courage her different son had shown. I always knew there was something special about you, she said, from the first moment I saw you come out of the egg. Being different was never your fault, but your greatest virtue. Before leaving, the young swan had one last conversation with Sabina the owl. Your words have accompanied me throughout my journey, he said. The old owl tilted her head thoughtfully. Sometimes we need to lose ourselves in order to find ourselves, she replied. Your journey wasn't just about discovering that you were a swan, but about discovering who you really are inside. As she said goodbye, she promised Mrs. Patricia that she would come back to visit her regularly. You will always be my mother, he said, no matter how much time passes or how far I fly. As he took off back to his new home on the big lake, the young swan carried with him a deeper understanding of love, acceptance, and true beauty. His story was no longer about being an ugly duckling, but about the journey of self-discovery that everyone in one way or another has to undertake. And so he flew back to his family of swans, his heart light, and full knowing that he had found not only his true identity, but also the certainty that being different was never a curse. It was, in fact, the most precious gift he could have received. In a small village, in the heart of the forest, where the trees danced to the wind and the birds sang their sweetest melodies, there lived a very special family of piglets. Mother Pig, a kind and wise lady, had raised her 3 little ones with all the love and dedication a mother could offer. Now that her little ones were no longer so little, the moment had come that every mother dreads seeing her children off to build their own lives. Cece, the youngest of the siblings, was known for his carefree manner and infectious laugh. He always preferred playing to working and dreamed of endless days of fun. He dressed in colorful clothes and a crooked straw hat he had found on one of his walks through the village. Her easy smile hid a certain immaturity that worried Mamai Porca. Her middle brother Toto had an artistic temperament and loved to play his flute on sunny afternoons. More responsible than Cece, but still far from the necessary prudence, he balanced work and leisure, although his scales always tipped a little more in favor of fun. His dreamy eyes reflected his romantic nature, and his navy blue vest was his pride. Pig, the oldest of the 3, was the embodiment of responsibility. Wearing round glasses and an impeccable apron, he spent hours studying books on architecture and construction. His methodical nature sometimes irritated his younger siblings, who didn't understand why he took everything so seriously. One particularly important morning, Mama Pig gathered her 3 children in the cozy living room of their home. The aroma of freshly baked apple pie filled the room as she prepared to have a conversation that would change the fate of her family forever. My dears, she began, straightening her flowered apron, you have grown into wonderful little pigs. The time has come for each of you to go your own way and build your own home. Her eyes shone with a mixture of pride and maternal concern. Cece jumped for joy, already imagining all the parties she could throw in her future home. Toto began, strumming his flute mentally, composing a song about independence. Pig, for his part, adjusted his glasses and began to make notes in his ever-present notebook. But remember, continued Mama Pig, the forest can be a dangerous place. There are creatures that aren't as friendly as they seem. Her tone became more serious. In particular, beware of the big bad wolf. The three brothers had heard stories about the dreaded big bad wolf. They said he was a cunning and hungry creature who loved to play tricks on the forest dwellers. His yellow eyes glowed in the darkness, and his breath was so strong that it could knock down small trees. Don't worry, Mama, said Cece with a carefree smile. I'll build my house quickly and have a housewarming party. I'm going to make it a nice cozy house, added Toto, playing a few happy notes on his flute, with a special place for my musical performances. Pig just shook his head, worried about his brother's carelessness. A house needs to be strong and secure, he commented. It's not something you build overnight. Mama Pig gave each of them a small bundle containing provisions and basic tools. Then she hugged them at length, her silent tears wetting the soft fur of her cubs. Always remember what I have taught you, she said. Work hard and help each other. The next morning, the three brothers set off in different directions through the forest, each carrying their belongings and dreams. The sun rose lazily through the trees, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, as if nature itself was blessing this new journey. As they walked along, they didn't notice a pair of yellow eyes watching them from afar. Hidden among the shadows of the oldest trees in the forest, the big bad wolf was licking his lips in anticipation of the feast that those three chubby little pigs would provide. The forest, apparently peaceful, that morning held its own secrets and dangers. The ancient trees whispered stories of other animals who had underestimated the threats that resided there. The wind carried not only the dry leaves, but also the echoes of unheard warnings. And so began the great adventure of the three little pig brothers, each going their own way, each about to learn valuable lessons about responsibility, hard work, and perseverance. What they didn't yet know was that their choices in the coming hours and days would define not only the kind of home they would have, but also the kind of piggies they would become. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, the big bad wolf was plotting his evil plans, patiently watching the three brothers' every move. His sinister laugh echoed softly through the trees, promising to turn this adventure into something far more challenging than any of the little pigs could have imagined. The sun was already high in the sky when Cece, the youngest of the brothers, found an open field full of golden straw. Her eyes lit up at the discovery, and a mischievous smile appeared on her rosy muzzle. Perfect, he exclaimed, straightening his crooked straw hat. With all this straw, I can build my house in no time and still have time for a nap. Meanwhile, not far away, Toto wandered through the forest, playing his flute, enchanting the birds that followed him. His footsteps led him to a clearing where several tree trunks had been blown down by a recent storm. What luck, he thought, stowing his flute in the pocket of his navy blue vest. This wood will be perfect for my musical house. Pig, for his part, walked methodically, consulting a map he had drawn during his research. He was looking for the ideal spot near a water source on firm ground and with good visibility. After a few hours of meticulous searching, he found exactly what he was looking for, an elevated spot near a crystal clear stream with a small deposit of clay perfect for making bricks. Cece worked with haste, and carelessness, gathering large bundles of straw and tying them together clumsily. The quicker I finish, the more time I'll have to play, he hummed as he stacked the straw anyway. In a few hours, he had built something that vaguely resembled a house, an unstable structure that swayed in the slightest breath of wind. Toto devoted a little more time to its construction. Between musical breaks, he sawed logs and stacked them, creating walls that, although not perfectly aligned, seemed reasonably firm. He even created a small stage in one corner of the house where he could perform his concerts for the forest dwellers. In the area he had chosen, Pig began his meticulous work. First, he prepared a kiln to fire the bricks he would mold from the local clay. One bad brick can compromise the whole structure, he muttered to himself, carefully measuring each block before firing it. The big bad wolf watched each of the brothers from a distance, surprised by the different approaches they took. His yellow eyes shone with satisfaction as he saw the fragility of Cece's house. That'll be my appetizer, he thought, licking his lips. Toto's house didn't look very challenging either, but Pig's dedication irritated him deeply. As the day progressed, Cece had already finished her house and was organizing a small housewarming party. She invited some rabbits and squirrels from the neighborhood who looked worriedly at the shaking straw walls, but didn't want to disappoint the cheerful Pig. Look at that, boasted Cece, dancing in circles. I finished my house in one day. Who needs so much work when you can do something so fast and fun? The forest animals exchanged apprehensive glances, but smiled politely. Toto was also making progress with his construction, albeit more slowly. In between hammering, he often stopped to play his flute, claiming that music helps the wood fit together better. His house was beginning to take shape, with irregular windows and a door that creaked melodiously, while his younger brothers could already see the end of their work. Pig was still in the early stages of construction. Each brick was carefully inspected before being laid, and the foundation was measured and remedied to ensure total stability. At night, when Cece was sound asleep in her straw bed, and Toto was strumming the last notes of the day on his flute, Pig was still working by lamplight, consulting his books and making precise calculations for the next day. The big bad wolf, hiding in the shadows, watched everything with growing impatience. The straw house would be his first visit, that was for sure. After that, that shabby wooden structure wouldn't last long. As for the brick house, well, he'd have to think of something special for that one. The next few days brought more of the same Cece, enjoying her new life, off organizing parties and playing games Toto, alternating between working on his house and giving small concerts for his admirers in the forest. And Pig, methodical and tireless, continuing his construction, brick by brick. The wind whispered between the ancient trees of the forest, carrying with it the omen that soon those three different approaches to life would be put to the test. The dark clouds that were beginning to form on the horizon seemed to echo the approaching threat, but only Pig seemed to notice the signs of danger. Mother Pig, in her house in the village, looked out of the window every night, thinking of her three cubs. Her maternal heart knew that challenges awaited them, but she also trusted that the lessons she had tried to teach them would eventually make sense, even if the hard way. And so, as the moon rose in the starry sky, three different fates were being sealed, one by haste and carelessness, another by partial dedication and the third by prudence and perseverance. What none of the brothers knew was that their choices would soon be tested in the most dramatic way possible. The morning arrived with a different air in the forest. The wind blew stronger than usual, and the dark clouds on the horizon announced that changes were to come. The big bad wolf, who had been patiently waiting for the right moment, decided it was time to put his plan into action. Cece was in his straw house, lying in a makeshift hammock, humming nonchalantly. After a few days, his house was already showing clear signs of deterioration. Parts of the roof were beginning to crack, and the walls were shaking every time a strong breeze blew through. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the fragile structure, making Cece jump with fright. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. "It's me, a tired traveler in need of shelter," replied a gruff voice from outside. It was obviously the big bad wolf trying to disguise his voice. Cece, despite being carefree, remembered her mother's warnings. "I'm sorry," she replied, "but I can't open the door to strangers." The big bad wolf, losing patience, revealed his true nature. "Then I'll blow and blow until your house falls down." And filling his huge lungs with air, he blew as hard as he could. The straw house didn't stand a chance. With a single, powerful blow, the structure crumbled like dust in the wind. Cece, in a panic, barely had time to grab her hat before she was running towards her brother Toto's house. "Toto, Toto, open the door," screamed Cece desperately, banging on the door of the wooden house. Her brother, who was rehearsing a new tune, quickly let him in. "What happened?" asked Toto, worried by his little brother's agitated state. "The big bad wolf. He destroyed my house with one blow," explained Cece, still panting. Mom was right about him. They had barely finished talking when they heard it again. "Talk, talk, talk. Piggies, piggies, let me in." The big bad wolf's voice now didn't even try to disguise its threatening nature. "Never," replied the two brothers in unison. "Then I'll blow and blow until this house falls down." The wolf filled his lungs again, this time needing two powerful blows to make the wooden house start to give way. The boards creaked, the windows shook, and with a third devastating blow, Toto's house began to collapse. The two brothers, holding only Toto's flute and Cece's hat, ran towards Pig's brick house. Meanwhile, Pig continued his methodical work, now finishing off his sturdy building. He had installed a sturdy chimney windows with reinforced locks and a solid oak door. "Pig, Pig, please let us in," his brothers shouted in desperation, banging frantically on the door. Pig, who had expected something like this, quickly opened the door for his brothers and locked it again. "Are you all right?" he asked, adjusting his glasses as he examined his frightened siblings. "The big bad wolf destroyed our houses," explained Toto, still shivering. "He blew and blew until they fell down." Pig shook his head, serious expression on his face. "That's why I was so insistent on the importance of solid construction. This house was made to withstand any threat." It wasn't long before they heard the menacing voice of the big bad wolf. "Piggies, piggies, this house is going to fall down too. I'm going to blow and blow until there's nothing left." The wolf filled his lungs and blew as hard as he could, but the house didn't move. He blew again and again until he was red with exhaustion, but the building stood firm. Frustrated with his failure, The big bad wolf began to circle the house, looking for any weak points. His yellow eyes lit up when he spotted the chimney. If I can't get in through the door, he thought, I'll go down the chimney. Inside the house, Pig had already foreseen this possibility. He quickly instructed his brothers to help him with his plan. While the wolf climbed onto the roof, they lit a large fire in the fireplace and put a huge cauldron of water on to boil. The big bad wolf, confident in his new plan, began to climb down the chimney, imagining that he would take the three little pigs by surprise. What he didn't expect was the cauldron of boiling water that awaited him. With a howl of pain, the big bad wolf shot out of the chimney, his tail scorched and his pride wounded. He ran away, vowing never to return to that part of the forest. The three siblings, finally safe, hugged each other in relief. Cece and Toto, especially, were beginning to understand the value of their mother's words and their older brother's example. Sorry, Pig, said Cece, crestfallen. You tried to warn us about the importance of doing things right. Yes, agreed Toto, holding up his flute. We could have lost a lot more if it hadn't been for you. Pig smiled gently at his brothers. The important thing is that you're safe now, and it's never too late to learn and start again. As night fell over the forest, the three brothers sat together around the fireplace. Toto played a soft tune on his flute. Cece helped Pig prepare dinner, and for the first time, the three siblings truly appreciated the value of a job well done and family togetherness. News of what had happened soon spread through the forest, reaching the ears of Mother Pig, who smiled proudly when she heard that her children had not only survived the danger, but had also learned valuable lessons in the process. After escaping from the big bad wolf, the lives of the three little pigs began to take a new direction. In the brick house, Cece and Toto, still shaken by the loss of their home, began to take a closer look at how their older brother organized every aspect of daily life. The brick house, which had previously seemed excessively spacious for a pig, now perfectly accommodated the three siblings. Pig had planned several rooms, as if he knew that one day he would need to house his family. The kitchen was large and well equipped, the study room full of useful books, and there was even a small stage where Toto could practice his music. You know, said Cece one morning as she helped Pig organize the pantry, I never thought tidying up could be so satisfying. He had discovered that keeping everything in order was not only practical, but also brought a sense of accomplishment. Toto, for his part, began to incorporate more discipline into his music. Instead of playing randomly throughout the day, he set specific times to practice, allowing him to also take part in household chores. Music sounds better when you have a purpose, he commented, after helping to build a new fence around the house. Pig watched the changes in his brothers with silent satisfaction. Although the situation that brought them together was frightening, it provided a unique opportunity to grow together. He began to teach his brothers about construction, sharing his knowledge in a patient and methodical way. One day, while they were working together on the garden they had started, they heard a commotion coming from the forest. It was a group of animals running scared. The big bad wolf, they shouted. He's back and angrier than ever. The three brothers looked at each other worriedly. Apparently, the wolf hadn't given up completely. Pig quickly led everyone into the house, including the frightened animals seeking refuge. "We needn't fear," said Pig, adjusting his glasses. "This house was built to withstand any threat." Even so, they could see that the wolf had changed his tactics. Instead of attacking directly, he began to circle the area, intimidating the forest dwellers and isolating the house. Cece, who would have hidden in fear before, now showed new courage. "We can't let him terrorize our forest friends," he declared, surprising his brothers with his determination. Toto agreed, his flute firmly held in his paws. "We need to come up with a plan to protect not just us, but the whole community." The three brothers gathered in the study room, where Pig kept his precious books and projects. Together, they began to develop a plan that combined Cece's creativity, Toto's musicality, and Pig's ingenuity. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly. Pig taught his brothers how to build small, safe havens scattered around the forest using simplified but efficient techniques. Cece, with her sociable nature, organized the animals into groups for surveillance and mutual support. Toto developed a system of musical signals that could alert everyone to the wolf's presence. The transformation of the three brothers was remarkable. Cece, once so carefree, now responsibly led the teams building the shelters. Toto used his music not just for entertainment, but as a vital communication tool. And Pig, always so focused on his own projects, was learning to adapt his knowledge to help others. Mama Pig, who occasionally visited them, could hardly believe how much her children had changed. "You've grown so much," she said, with tears in her eyes, during one of her visits. "Not just in skill, but in wisdom and compassion." News of the three little pigs' actions spread through the forest. Other animals began to seek them out, asking for advice on how to protect their own homes. The brick house became a center of learning and cooperation. The big bad wolf, realizing that his bullying was no longer having the same effect, began to show signs of frustration. His nocturnal howls sounded more like wails than threats, and his presence, once so feared, began to seem more pathetic than frightening. One night, as the three siblings were getting ready for bed, Cece made an interesting observation. "You know, I used to think that building a house was just about having a place to live. Now, I understand that it's about creating a safe place, not just for us, but for everyone who needs help." Toto, softly strumming his flute, added, "And it's not just about the physical structure. It's about building relationships, trust, and community." Pig smiled, proud of how his brothers had matured. "Exactly. And the stronger we build those bonds, the harder it will be for any big bad wolf to defeat us." The full moon shone through the reinforced windows of the brick house, illuminating the three brothers who, united, had found a strength that none of them possessed individually. What had begun as a story of survival was turning into a lesson in the power of unity and perseverance. And as the wind blew gently outside, carrying with it the last notes of Toto's lullaby, the three brothers knew that there were still more challenges ahead, but now they were prepared to face them together, stronger and wiser than ever. The transformation of the forest was visible to everyone who lived there. What had once been a place of fear and mistrust had now become an example of cooperation and community strength. The three little pig brothers had not only overcome their own differences, but had also inspired a profound change in the whole community. One particularly hectic morning, while Pig was supervising the construction of yet another community shelter, Cece ran up to him with alarming news. Pig, the squirrels in the northern region, have just reported that they found the big bad wolf wounded in a hunter's trap. Toto, who was nearby teaching a group of young rabbits to use his musical alert system, quickly joined the brothers. The three of them looked at each other thoughtfully. The big bad wolf, their old enemy, was now in danger. What should we do? Asked Toto, his flute, resting restlessly on his paws. After everything he's done to us. Pig adjusted his glasses, a serious expression on his muzzle. We can't ignore someone in danger, even if they are our enemy. Mom always taught us about compassion, remember? Cece, who had matured so much, nodded. Pig is right. Besides, maybe this is an opportunity to show Lobo that there is a better way to live. The three brothers quickly organized a rescue team. Pig brought his first aid kit, Toto prepared a makeshift stretcher, and Cece gathered some of the strongest animals in the forest to help with transportation. When they found Lobo, the scene was heartbreaking. He was thin, his once lustrous fur was now dull, and his hind paw was caught in a cruel trap. When he saw the three little pigs approaching, his yellow eyes widened with a mixture of fear and shame. Have you come? Have you come to laugh at me? He asked, his voice hoarse and weak, very different from the powerful howls of yesteryear. No, replied Pig, gently approaching with care. We've come to help. The wolf remained silent as the brothers worked together to free him from the trap. Pig used his technical knowledge to dismantle the mechanism, while Toto softly played his flute to calm the wolf, and Cece organized the other animals for transport. Why are you helping me? Asked the wolf, confused, as he was carefully placed on the stretcher. After everything I've done. Because it's the right thing to do, replied Cece, simply a wisdom in her voice that would have surprised her younger self. They took the wolf to the brick house where Pig had prepared a space for his recovery. Over the next few days, the three brothers took turns caring for their old enemy. Toto played soft music to help him sleep. Cece told stories to distract him, and Pig tended to his wounds with precision and patience. Gradually, the wolf began to change. Not only was his paw healing, but something in his heart was also transforming. He watched with growing admiration as the three brothers worked together, as the forest community respected them, and as everyone seemed happier in this new way of life. I never understood it, he confessed one evening as the four of them shared a meal. I always thought I needed to terrorize others to be strong. But you're stronger together without having to scare anyone. Mother Pig, who visited, often smiled as she saw the transformation not only of her children, but also of her former adversary. Sometimes, she said wisely, our greatest lessons come from the most unexpected places. As the wolf recovered, he began to take part in community activities. His strength, once used to destroy, now helped to build new shelters. His knowledge of the forest became invaluable for establishing safe routes and identifying dangerous areas. One day, while everyone was working together on a new community project, Pig observed something extraordinary. Cece was teaching basic building techniques to a group of young animals. Toto was coordinating a choir that included all kinds of forest creatures and the wolf. The wolf was using his strength to help carry building materials with a genuine smile on his muzzle. Who knew, Pig commented to himself, that decision to build a brick house would lead us here. The forest had become a place where different species lived in harmony, where strength was not measured by the ability to intimidate, but by the willingness to help. The brick house, which began as a refuge for a prudent little pig, became a symbol of unity and hope for the whole community. And so, the story of the three little pigs continued to inspire generations, not just as a tale about the importance of a job well done, but as a lesson in the power of perseverance, compassion, and the capacity for transformation. Even the most unlikely of enemies could become a friend, and even the most carefree of brothers could become a responsible leader. The moon continued to shine over the brick house every night, illuminating not just a well-built structure, but a home where wisdom, music, and joy mingled in perfect harmony. And if you pass through that part of the forest today, you can still hear Toto's melodies, Cece's laughter, Pig's wise advice, and surprisingly, the friendly howl of a wolf who has learned that true power lies in togetherness and love. In a small French village where the aroma of fresh bread mingled with the buzz of morning conversations, lived Belle, a young girl unlike any other. While girls her age worried about dresses and suitors, she found refuge in the pages of the books she always carried with her. Her father, Maurice, was an eccentric inventor who spent his days in his workshop creating machines that the villagers considered strange and useless. Belle had a natural beauty that attracted stares wherever she went, but it was her intelligence and kindness that really made her stand out. Every morning she walked across the village square to the small bookshop, greeting the shopkeepers and ignoring the whispers of the people who found her peculiar for her love of reading. Gaston, the most admired man in the village, had decided that Belle would be his wife. Tall, strong, and vain, he couldn't accept that a woman could refuse his advances. For him, Belle was just a trophy to be won, and his persistence in wooing her was becoming increasingly annoying. Belle, why waste time with these books when you could be admiring a real hero? Boasted Gaston, flexing his muscles as he weaved his way through the village. Because Gaston books take me to extraordinary places and introduce me to fascinating ideas, replied Belle, trying to politely sidestep him. Maurice was working on his newest invention, an automatic wood-chopping machine, when he received an invitation to present his invention at a distant fair. Belle helped her father prepare the cart, worried about the journey he would make through the gloomy forest that surrounded the village. Be careful, Dad, Belle urged, adjusting the scarf around Maurice's neck. The forest can be dangerous, especially at night. Don't worry, my dear, smiled Maurice, hugging his daughter. Philippe knows the way, and I'll be back in a few days with a first-place medal. What neither of them could have imagined was that this seemingly ordinary farewell would change their lives forever. Maurice set off at dusk, but as night fell, an unexpected storm forced him to deviate from his planned route. The wolves began to howl in the distance, and Philippe, his faithful horse, became increasingly nervous. Amid the darkness and the storm, Maurice spotted an immense iron gate. Beyond it stood a majestic castle, although its gloomy and decayed appearance suggested that it had been abandoned for a long time. Desperate for shelter, he pushed open the rusty gate and entered the castle grounds. The castle's interior was even more impressive than its facade. Ancient tapestries covered the walls, and a lit fireplace suggested that the place wasn't as abandoned as it looked. Maurice heard whispering voices, but couldn't see anyone. "Hello, is anyone there?" He called out, his voice echoing through the empty corridors. The warmth of the fireplace and a comfortable armchair invited him to rest, but his moment of peace was brutally interrupted by a deafening roar. A monstrous shadow loomed over him, and before he could comprehend what was happening, Maurice found himself face to face with a terrible creature, half man, half animal, with sharp fangs and eyes that blazed with fury. "How dare you invade my castle?" thundered the beast, his voice resounding off the walls. Maurice tried to explain himself, trembling with fear, but the beast wasn't interested in his excuses. In a matter of minutes, the poor inventor was dragged into the castle dungeons, where cold, damp bars would be his new home. Philippe, frightened by the events, managed to escape and returned to the village. When Belle saw the horse returning without her father, her heart froze. Without hesitation, she mounted Philippe and asked him to take her to where Maurice was. The journey through the dark forest didn't daunt her. Belle was determined to find her father, even if it meant facing all the dangers the forest could hide. The horse led her along the same winding path until the gates of the mysterious castle appeared in front of them. Inside the castle, seemingly inanimate objects watched her arrival with interest. Lumiere, a talking chandelier, and Cogsworth, a clock that moved on its own, were whispering about the young woman's presence. They, like all the other servants in the castle, had been turned into objects by the same curse that had affected their master. Belle found her father in the dungeon, his hands frozen and his health clearly weakened by the cold and damp. "Oh, Dad, I've got to get you out of here," she exclaimed, holding her hands through the bars. It was then that the beast emerged from the shadows, his presence filling the room with terror. Belle, although frightened, didn't back down. Instead, she offered to take her father's place as a prisoner. "Would you take his place?" asked the beast, surprise evident in his hoarse voice. "Belle, no. You don't know what you're doing," protested Maurice. "If I stay, will you promise to free my father?" asked Belle, her voice firm despite the fear she felt. "Yes," replied the beast, "but you must promise to stay here forever." Belle agreed, and before Maurice could protest again, he was dragged out of the castle and sent back to the village in an enchanted carriage. Belle watched through the tower window as her father disappeared into the darkness of the forest, silent tears streaming down his face. What Belle didn't know was that her brave decision had planted the first seed of hope in the beast's hardened heart. In the highest room of the castle, an enchanted rose floated under a glass dome, its petals beginning to fall one by one. Time was running out to break the curse, and now for the first time in years, there was a chance that true love could bloom in the shadows of that cursed castle. Night fell over the castle, bringing with it the weight of loneliness and the uncertain fate that awaited both Belle and the beast. As the young woman prepared for her first night as a prisoner, she couldn't have imagined that her life was about to change in ways that even her beloved adventure books couldn't have predicted. On her first night in the castle, Belle remained in her room, refusing to dine with the beast, despite the insistent invitations brought by Madame Samovar, a talking teapot with a motherly voice. The darkness of the room reflected her state of mind, but her natural curiosity soon began to awaken as she observed the luxurious details of her surroundings. Mademoiselle called a soft voice, and Belle discovered that her closet was also alive. I'm Madame de Garderobe. Perhaps a new dress would gladden your heart. Belle was beginning to get used to the surprises of the enchanted castle. The animated objects, although initially frightening, showed a kindness that made her feel less alone. Lumière especially seemed determined to make her stay more pleasant. Mon Dieu, we can't let our guests starve, exclaimed the chandelier, organizing a spectacular musical number in the kitchen. The cutlery danced, the plates swirled, and the music filled the air with an infectious energy that even Belle couldn't resist. The surprising performance led her to explore more of the castle. Over the next few nights, while the beast remained aloof in his west wing, Belle discovered new secrets in every corridor. The library, however, remained closed, although she could see its imposing doors at the end of a long corridor. One afternoon, while walking through the snow-covered gardens, Belle noticed subtle changes in the beast's behavior. He watched her from afar, his movements less threatening, almost timid. During one of these moments, she was surprised by a group of wolves that had infiltrated the castle grounds. The beast emerged from the shadows in an instant, placing himself between Belle and the predators. The fight was fierce, and although he managed to fend off the wolves, he was wounded. Belle, who had the perfect opportunity to escape, chose to help him. Stay still, she ordered, cleaning his wounds with warm water. It'll sting a bit. That wouldn't have happened if you hadn't run away, growled the beast, more out of pain than anger. And you wouldn't have been hurt if you hadn't come to save me, Belle replied, her voice softening. Thank you. That moment marked a change in the dynamic between them. The beast began to show a gentler side, although he still struggled with his tempestuous nature. Belle, for her part, began to see beyond his frightening appearance. Cogsworth and Lumière watched this relationship develop with renewed hope. Every little bit of progress was celebrated by the castle servants, who saw in the interactions between Belle and the beast the possibility of breaking the curse that imprisoned them. Maybe she really is the one we've been waiting for, whispered Madame Samovar to Chip, her teacup daughter. The beast, inspired by Belle's passion for literature, decided to do something special. One morning, he led her through the corridors of the castle blindfolded. Trust me, he asked, his husky voice softer than usual. When he removed the blindfold, Belle found herself in front of the most magnificent library she had ever seen. Thousands of books reached to the ceiling on shelves that seemed endless. Her eyes sparkled with a joy that made the beast's heart race. It's incredible, she exclaimed, turning to take in the vastness of the place. I've never seen so many books in my life. It's all yours, declared the beast, discovering that Belle's smile was worth more than all the treasures in the castle. Afternoons were filled with shared reading. Belle discovered that the beast was an eager, if sometimes impatient, student. She would help him with difficult words, and he would share stories about the books he had read in his youth before the curse. Meanwhile, in the village, Gaston hadn't given up on Belle. Consumed by obsession and fueled by delusions of grandeur, he plotted ways to rescue Belle. ignoring Maurice's explanations about the castle and the beast. That crazy old man needs to be taught a lesson, Gaston muttered to Le Fou, his faithful squire. And when Belle realizes that her father is in danger, she'll have no choice but to accept my proposal of marriage. In the castle, oblivious to Gaston's machinations, Belle and the beast discovered more about each other. During a particularly pleasant dinner, where the beast was trying, with comical results, to use cutlery properly, Belle noticed how his eyes, once so frightening, now conveyed a kindness she had never noticed before. "Why didn't you ever tell me your real name?" asked Belle, as they watched the stars from the balcony after dinner. The beast hesitated, painful memories of the past reflected in his gaze. "Adam," he finally answered, "but that name belongs to someone I stopped being a long time ago." Belle gently touched his hairy arm. "Maybe it's time to rediscover him." In the highest room of the castle, another petal of the enchanted rose fell silently. Time continued to pass, but for the first time since the curse had been placed, there was real hope that love could flourish in the shadows of the cursed castle. The atmosphere in the castle continued to change subtly. The once gloomy corridors seemed brighter, and the music of the enchanted servants echoed more frequently through the halls. Belle and Adam spent more and more time together, sharing stories in the library or strolling through the gardens, which, with the arrival of spring, were beginning to awaken from their winter slumber. During one of these afternoons, while Adam was teaching Belle about the different species of roses in the garden, she noticed a wistful expression on his face as he observed a particularly beautiful rose bush. "What makes it so special?" asked Belle, referring to the enchanted rose she occasionally saw shining under the glass dome. Adam hesitated before answering, his voice laden with regret. "It's a constant reminder of my past mistakes. Each petal that falls marks the time I have left to—" He stopped abruptly, looking away. Belle realized that there was much more to the story than he was willing to reveal, but respected his silence. Instead, she concentrated on showing him how his heart had changed, how his natural kindness was beginning to overcome his bestial appearance. Meanwhile, in the village, Gaston was putting his plan into action. He had convinced the director of the local asylum, Monsieur Darc, to take part in his scheme to have Maurice committed. "The old man is completely mad, talking about monsters and magic castles," Gaston argued to the crowd gathered in the tavern. "It's our duty to protect the village and help Maurice, and of course, comfort poor Belle in her time of need." Le Fou, although still loyal to Gaston, was beginning to question his friend's actions. "Don't you think you're going too far?" he whispered, but was quickly silenced by a threatening look from Gaston. In the castle, Madame Samovar watched with satisfaction as Belle transformed not only the beast, but the entire environment around him. "It's as if she brings light wherever she goes," she commented to Lumiere and Cogsworth. "Oui, but time is running out," reminded Lumiere, his flame flickering with concern. "The master must not only love, but be loved in return." One evening, Adam decided to organize a special ball for Belle. Madame de Garderobe created a dazzling dress in shades of gold, while Lumiere coordinated the ballroom preparations. The beast, nervous at the prospect of dancing, received hasty lessons in etiquette from Cogsworth. When Belle came down the grand staircase that evening, Adam's heart almost stopped. She was radiant, and her smile lit up the hall more than all the chandeliers put together. The music began to play softly, and they danced as if they had been doing this all their lives. "Are you happy here with me?" asked Adam during the dance, his voice betraying his insecurity. Belle smiled, but her eyes revealed a shadow of sadness. "Yes, but I miss my father. I wish I could see him, if only for a moment." Adam led her to his bedroom, where he kept a magic mirror that showed anything the viewer wished to see. "Use it to see your father," he offered, handing Belle the mirror. The image that appeared in the mirror chilled Belle's blood. Maurice was staggering through the forest, coughing violently, clearly ill and disoriented. "Oh no, he's sick, he's dying," she exclaimed in anguish. Adam felt his heart break when he saw the despair in Belle's eyes. He looked at the enchanted rose, whose petals were dangerously thin, and made a decision that could cost him everything. "Then you must go to him," said Adam, his voice laced with emotion. "What?" Belle could hardly believe her ears. "I set you free. You're no longer my prisoner." The words seemed to tear pieces out of her heart as he spoke them. Belle looked deeply into Adam's eyes, seeing the pain and love they contained. "Thank you for understanding how much he needs me," she said, handing back the mirror. "Take the mirror with you," Adam insisted. "That way you'll have a way to look back, to remember me." Belle left quickly, leaving behind a castle steeped in sadness. The servants watched her departure with heavy hearts, knowing that with her went the last hope of breaking the curse. "Why did you let her go?" asked Cogsworth, perplexed. "I had to," replied Adam, watching Belle disappear into the darkness. "I love her." The words echoed through the castle like a bitter-sweet whisper. The love that could have broken the curse was there, but now it seemed too late. Adam climbed to the highest balcony of the castle, his roar of agony echoing through the night. As another rose petal fell softly, Belle found her father lying in the snow and took him back home, determined to look after him. But she had barely had time to settle him in his bed when she heard Furious knocking at the door. It was Gaston, accompanied by a crowd carrying torches and a wagon bearing the asylum's symbol. "We've come for your father, Belle," Gaston announced with a cruel smile, "unless you agree to marry me." Gaston's plan was in motion, and Belle found herself trapped between love for her father and her own freedom. Meanwhile, in the castle, Adam remained in his tower, his heart torn between the joy of having known true love and the pain of having lost it forever. Belle, determined to prove her father's sanity, pulled out the magic mirror. "Show me the beast," she commanded in front of the hostile crowd. The mirror shone brightly, revealing the image of Adam in all his bestial form. Screams of horror echoed through the crowd, but Belle defended herself passionately. "No, he's gentle and kind. He taught me that true beauty lies within." Gaston, consumed by jealousy and anger at the look on Belle's face when she spoke of the beast, snatched the mirror from her hands. "She's as much in love with the beast as he is dangerous," he shouted, manipulating the fears of the crowd. "The beast will come and devour your children. We must kill the beast." The crowd, inflamed by Gaston's words, quickly turned into a furious mob. Belle tried desperately to make them understand, but Gaston ordered her and Maurice to be locked in the basement of their own house to keep them safe. "I can't let him hurt the beast," cried Belle, struggling as she was pushed into the basement. He's not the beast, Gaston. You are. Meanwhile, in the castle, the servants watched with apprehension as the angry mob approached through the windows. Cogsworth Lumiere and all the others knew they had to defend their home and their master. If it's a fight they want, it's a fight they'll have, declared Lumiere, gathering the other enchanted objects to prepare the castle's defense. Adam, still in his tower, remained oblivious to the approaching danger. His heart was too broken to care about any threat. Belle's words about his goodness echoed in his mind, making him wonder if he really deserved such a positive judgment. In the basement of Belle's house, Chip, who had hidden in her bag during the escape from the castle, turned out to be her unexpected salvation. The little cup managed to find Maurice's invention, the wood-chopping machine, and with some creativity, they used it to break down the basement door. We need to get to the castle before they do, exclaimed Belle, hastily mounting Philippe. Father, are you strong enough to ride? My dear, for your sake, and the beast's, I'll find the strength, replied Maurice, climbing on his horse behind his daughter. In the castle, the battle had begun. The enchanted objects bravely defended their home using their unique features as improvised weapons. Madame de Garderobe threw clothes that came to life and attacked the invaders, while Lumiere strategically scorched the attacker's pants. Gaston, ignoring the chaos around him, searched determinedly for Adam. His only goal was to kill the beast and prove himself the hero of the story. He found him in the west wing, sitting gloomily next to the enchanted rose. Get up and fight, Gaston taunted, wielding his bow. Or are you too cowardly to defend yourself? Adam just looked sadly at his attacker, unwilling to fight. Leave me alone, he muttered, turning to continue his solitary contemplation. The refusal to fight infuriated Gaston even more, who fired an arrow hitting Adam in the back. The sharp pain finally awakened something inside him, not anger or a desire for revenge, but a survival instinct that had been dormant since Belle's departure. The fight that followed was brutal, with Gaston and Adam clashing across the castle rooftops in the storm that was beginning to fall. Gaston, with his strength and hunting skills, proved to be a formidable opponent, but Adam, even wounded, possessed superhuman strength. Belle arrived at the castle just as the battle was reaching its climax. Her heart raced at the sight of a wounded Adam fighting for his life against Gaston on the castle's slippery parapets. Adam, she shouted, her voice cutting through the storm. The sound of Belle's voice made Adam turn his eyes, meeting hers. In that moment of distraction, Gaston saw his opportunity and attacked again, but Adam managed to dodge at the last moment, causing Gaston to lose his balance. Please don't, pleaded Gaston, slipping over the edge of the roof. Adam, showing the true change in his heart, reached out to save his attacker. Take my hand, he offered, but Gaston, in his arrogance and hatred, preferred to try one last treacherous attack. The sudden movement caused him to lose his balance, completely falling into the depths of the abyss below the castle. Adam, exhausted and wounded, staggered back to the balcony where Belle was waiting for him. You're back, he whispered, gently touching Belle's face. Of course I'm back, she replied, tears streaming down her cheeks. I couldn't let them hurt you. I love you. But before Adam could reply, His body succumbed to his injuries, and he fell into Belle's arms. The last petal of the enchanted rose fluttered, threatening to fall at any moment as Belle hugged Adam's inert body, her sobs echoing through the stormy night. The servants watched the scene with broken hearts, knowing that they were witnessing not only the possible death of their master, but also the end of any hope of breaking the curse. The rain continued to fall, mixing with Belle's tears, as she held Adam in her arms, refusing to let him go. I love you. Belle's words were still echoing in the air when something extraordinary began to happen. Tiny beams of golden light began to fall from the sky like shooting stars, enveloping Adam's body. Belle stood back in amazement as he was lifted into the air by an invisible, magical force. The transformation was gradual and magnificent. The fur began to dissipate. The claws turned into human hands, and the bestial face gave way to the features of a young prince. The light was so intense that Belle had to shield her eyes. When she was finally able to look again, she saw a tall, handsome man standing before her, dressed in elegant clothes. The prince turned slowly, examining his own hands in amazement. His eyes, although different in appearance, held the same depth and gentleness that Belle had learned to love. Belle, he said, his voice softer, but still familiar. It's me. Belle approached hesitantly, studying his face. When their eyes met, she immediately recognized the look, that same look she'd learned to look for beyond the bestial appearance. It's you, she exclaimed, touching his face tenderly. The kiss that followed was more than a simple gesture of love. It was the conclusion of a journey of transformation. A wave of magic exploded from the couple, spreading through the castle like a golden wave. The gloomy gargoyles turned into statues of angels. The dark walls took on vibrant colors, and the dead gardens exploded into flowers. Throughout the castle, the servants began to return to their human form. Lumiere was once again a charming maitre, de Cogsworth a distinguished butler, and Madame Samovar a gentle housekeeper. Chip, who had arrived with Belle, transformed into a happy little boy, running into his mother's arms. Mommy, Mommy, we're human again, cried Chip, jumping for joy. Maurice, who had witnessed the whole transformation from the entrance to the castle, approached slowly, still trying to process the miracle he had just witnessed. Belle, my dear, this is extraordinary. Father. Belle ran to embrace him, pulling Adam by the hand. This is Adam, the man I've learned to love, who's always been there, hiding under the appearance of the beast. Adam bowed respectfully to Maurice. Sir, I know I started our relationship in the worst possible way. I ask for your forgiveness, and if you'll allow me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life making up for past mistakes. Maurice, seeing the sincerity in the prince's eyes and the happiness on his daughter's face, gave her a warm smile. Belle's love has already proven its worth. If she has chosen it, that is enough for me. The next few days were filled with celebration at the castle. News of the transformation spread quickly, and little by little, the villagers began to return, discovering that Maurice's crazy stories were in fact true. Lei Fu, who had survived the battle, became a frequent visitor to the castle, finding true friendship among the old enchanted objects. His change of allegiance symbolized how love could transform not only a cursed prince, but everyone around him. The library which had been Adam's first real gift to Belle, became an open space for all the villagers. Belle began teaching the children to read, fulfilling her dream of sharing her love of books with others. You see, Lumiere commented to Cogsworth, watching Belle lead a reading class, who would have thought that our salvation would come through a young girl who loved books? And who would have thought, replied Cogsworth, with a smile, that you'd be right about anything. The castle, once a place of darkness and sadness, became a center of light and learning. Adam and Belle ruled with wisdom and compassion, never forgetting the lessons their love story had taught them, that true beauty lies within, and that love has the power to transform even the most hardened heart. On special nights, when the moon was full and the stars shone brightly, Adam and Belle still danced in the grand ballroom, remembering that first dance that had changed their lives forever. The servants now, a real family, watched with smiles on their faces, knowing that the curse hadn't just been broken, it had been transformed into a blessing that brought love and happiness to everyone. The enchanted rose, although it had long since lost its petals, was preserved under its glass dome as a constant reminder that true love can bloom in the most unlikely places, and that the most important beauty is that which cannot be seen with the eyes. And so, in the castle that had once been cursed by arrogance, now blessed by love, Belle and Adam lived their story, not just happily ever after, but more importantly, growing and learning together every day, proving that true love is not a magical ending, but a transformative beginning. In 19th century London, where the smoke from the chimneys danced against the gray sky, and the cobbled streets echoed with the sounds of carriages, the Darling family lived in a modest but cozy house. Wendy Darling, a 12-year-old girl with bright eyes and an even brighter imagination, shared a room with her younger brothers John, a 10-year-old who dreamed of pirate adventures, and Michael, the 6-year-old, who still cuddled his teddy bear every night. Mrs. Darling was a loving mother who every night carefully stored her children's dreams in little imaginary drawers in their minds, while telling them stories before bed. Mr. Darling, although somewhat strict with finances and concerned with appearances, had a kind heart hidden beneath his austere exterior. The family also had Nana, a devoted St. Bernard dog who served as the children's nanny, an unusual arrangement that often embarrassed Mr. Darling in front of the neighbors. One particularly starry night, while Mrs. Darling was putting the children to bed, she noticed a strange shadow dancing in the room. It was no ordinary shadow. It seemed to have a life of its own, and even more curiously, it didn't belong to anyone in the room. When she tried to catch it, it flew out of the window like a frightened bird. Mrs. Darling held this event close to her heart, worried about what it might mean. The stories Wendy told her brothers every night were full of pirates, fairies, and extraordinary adventures. She had a special gift for storytelling, transforming the children's rooms into pirate ships, enchanted forests, and mysterious caves through her words. John and Michael hung on every word, their eyes wide with excitement as their imaginations flew to faraway magical places. It was on one of these evenings, when their parents had gone out for an important dinner, that something extraordinary happened. A golden glow, no bigger than a butterfly, came through the bedroom window, followed by a boy dressed in leaves and vines. He floated in the air as if gravity were just a polite suggestion that he preferred to ignore. His name was Peter Pan, and he was looking for something. My shadow, he exclaimed, scanning the corners of the room. Have you seen her around? Wendy, who was only pretending to sleep, sat up in bed amazed. The boy didn't look much older than her, but there was something in his eyes, a mixture of wild joy and ancient loneliness that made him unlike anyone she had ever met. The little golden light that accompanied him was Tinker Bell, a fairy with a strong temper and even stronger jealousy. She tinkled furiously when she saw Peter's interest in Wendy, although only he seemed to understand her language of bells. When Wendy found the shadow tucked away in her mother's drawer and helped Peter sew it back on after a few unsuccessful attempts by him to glue it on with soap, an instant friendship was formed. Peter told them about Neverland, a place where children never grew up, where there were adventures every day, and where he led a group of lost boys, children who had fallen out of their baby carriages and were never reclaimed. Why don't you come with me? Peter asked, hovering in the air with a mischievous grin. You can tell stories to the lost boys, and your brothers can join in our adventures. The offer was tempting. Wendy looked at her brothers, who were already awake and excited at the possibility. The idea of never having to grow up, of living in a place where adventure was always lurking, was irresistible to children. But there were dangers in Neverland that Peter mentioned casually, as if they were part of the fun. Captain Hook and his pirates, who swore revenge on Peter after he cut off the captain's hand and threw it to a crocodile, the same crocodile that now followed Hook everywhere, having developed a particular taste for pirates and a ticking clock in his stomach. There were also the Indians from Tiger Lily's tribe, the mermaids with their enchanting voices and whimsical personalities, and the fairies who, as Tinker Bell clearly demonstrated, could be as temperamental as they were beautiful. But how will we get there? Asked John, adjusting his glasses enthusiastically. By flying, of course, replied Peter, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. All it takes is a happy thought and a little fairy dust. Tinker, Bell still annoyed, was persuaded to share her magic dust with the children. Soon, Wendy, John, and Michael discovered that they could float first clumsily, banging against the ceiling, then more gracefully, as they learned to control their direction. The decision was made in a moment of pure childish magic and excitement. Worries about their parents growing up and the responsibilities of the adult world seemed distant and unimportant in the face of the promise of eternal adventure. As the children followed Peter out of the window, climbing higher and higher into London's night sky, they left behind not only their home, but also the ordered and predictable world of the Victorian era. Ahead of them was the second star on the right, shining like a beacon to Neverland, where time worked differently and adventure awaited around every corner. What they didn't know was that this impulsive decision would lead them to discoveries about themselves, the value of family, and the true meaning of growing up, lessons none of them expected to learn when they left the comfort of their rooms that starry night. The journey to Neverland was an experience the darling children would never forget. Flying above the clouds, following Peter Pan through the starry sky, they discovered a completely new world. The air became thinner and shinier as they approached the second star on the right, and a magical sensation overtook their bodies. Michael clutched his teddy bear tightly as he flew occasionally, letting out squeals of delight as he plunged through the soft clouds. John maintained a posture that tried to look serious, like an explorer on an important expedition, but his eyes sparkled with excitement at each new discovery. Wendy, for her part, watched Peter with fascination, noticing how he seemed perfectly at ease in the air, as if he had been born to fly. Tinker Bell continued to show her displeasure, flying ahead of the group and occasionally casting annoyed glances at Wendy. Her golden glow flashed more brightly when Peter approached her to help her with some stronger air currents. "It's just over there," announced Peter, pointing to a bright spot on the horizon. As they got closer, Neverland began to take shape before their amazed eyes. It was an island that seemed to have been plucked straight out of children's most fantastic dreams. Snow-capped mountains on one side, golden beaches on the other, a dense rainforest in the center, and a crystal-clear lagoon where mermaids swam lazily. Anchored in a cove was Captain Hook's imposing pirate ship, the Jolly Roger, its black sails fluttering ominously in the wind. In the forest, smoke rose in spirals from the teepee of the indigenous tribe, and small points of light indicated where the fairies lived among the trees. Peter led the children to their secret hiding place, a hollow tree that served as the entrance to the Lost Boys' underground house. Before entering, however, they had to quickly hide behind some rocks. A group of pirates were patrolling the area. "That's Mr. Smee," whispered Peter, pointing to a short, pudgy pirate with round glasses. "He's Captain Hook's first mate. He's not very bright, but he's loyal to the captain." The pirates went on muttering about looking for Peter Pan and his new shadow, not realizing that the object of their search was only a few meters away, holding back their laughter, along with their new friends. When the way was clear, Peter led them to the secret entrance. Each child went down a different natural slide, landing on soft cushions made of leaves and feathers. Inside the hideout, 6 boys of varying ages, all dressed in animal skins and makeshift clothes, welcomed the visitors with a mixture of curiosity and enthusiasm. "Lost Boys, meet Wendy, John, and Michael," announced Peter proudly. "Wendy will be our new mother, and she'll tell us stories every night." The Lost Boys, Lightly Toodles, Nibs Curly, and the twins immediately surrounded Wendy with requests for stories and questions about what it was like to have a real mother. John was quickly embroiled in a discussion about pirate combat tactics, while Michael found a cozy corner to sit with his teddy bear, watching everything with wide eyes. The underground house was an extraordinary place, decorated with treasures found all over the island, colorful mermaid shells, exotic feathers from birds never seen before, hand-drawn maps showing secret hiding places, and even some jewels borrowed from the pirates. Wendy, naturally taking on the maternal role that Peter had assigned her, began to organize things. She noticed that the boys needed a bath, their clothes needed mending, and the place needed a good clean. But before she could begin any of these tasks, a distant sound caught everyone's attention. Tick, tick. The Lost Boys were instantly on alert. "It's the crocodile," explained Nibs in an excited whisper. "It must be chasing Captain Hook again." Peter flew to one of the secret windows of the hideout and confirmed it. The fearsome Captain Hook was running along the beach, his red coat fluttering in the wind, while the huge crocodile chased him with a hungry expression. The sound of the clock in his stomach echoed around the island, serving as a constant warning to the captain. Why don't we take advantage of him being distracted to explore the ship? Suggested Peter with a mischievous grin. The idea was met with shouts of approval from the Lost Boys and a worried look from Wendy. Isn't it dangerous? She asked, thinking of her younger brothers. Everything's an adventure in Neverland, replied Peter, already floating towards the exit. Besides, you still have a lot of fairy dust on you. If anything goes wrong, you can just fly away. And so, before Wendy could protest further, the whole group was on their way to the Jolly Roger, flying low over the waters of the Mermaid Lagoon. The aquatic creatures raised their heads to watch them pass, their colorful hair glistening in the sun, but there was something about their smiles that made Wendy shudder. They didn't look entirely friendly. As they approached the pirate ship, the sun began to set on Neverland, painting the sky with impossible colors and casting long shadows over the water. The adventure that awaited them was only the beginning of a series of events that would test not only their courage, but also the bonds they were beginning to form in this magical place, where time stood still and children never had to grow up, or so they thought. As they approached the Jolly Roger, Peter signaled for everyone to remain silent. The pirate ship was even more impressive up close, with its black sails and elaborate carvings in the dark wood. Most of the crew had left in search of the captain, leaving only a few sleepy pirates standing guard on deck. Peter, an expert at mischief, led the group to Captain Hook's cabin. The place was luxurious, decorated with maps, treasures, and an impressive collection of red coats. In the center was a table with a detailed map of Neverland, marked with mysterious X's and annotations in the captain's elaborate handwriting. Look at this, whispered John, adjusting his glasses as he examined a golden compass on the table. Michael, for his part, was fascinated by a small globe that rotated magically, showing lands that didn't even exist on ordinary maps. Wendy noticed something different, a half-open diary on the captain's desk. Curious, she approached it and began to read a few passages. To her surprise, she discovered that Hook hadn't always been a cruel pirate. Years ago, he had been a respected explorer, transformed by bitterness after his fateful encounter with Peter Pan. Meanwhile, the Lost Boys rummaged through drawers and chests, finding all kinds of treasure. Tinker Bell flew around her golden light, illuminating dark corners of the cabin, although she still cast suspicious glances at Wendy. Suddenly, they heard voices approaching. The captain's coming back, warned Curly, one of the Lost Boys, his eyes wide with fear. Quick hide, ordered Peter, as the children looked for places to hide. Wendy, John, and Michael hid behind a heavy curtain, while the Lost Boys squeezed inside an empty trunk. Peter floated up to the ceiling, blending into the shadows, and Tinker Bell hid inside a lantern. Captain Hook entered his cabin, panting and irritated after yet another crocodile chase. His long black hair was disheveled, and his metal hook glinted menacingly in the light of the lanterns. Mr. Smee followed him closely, trying to calm him down. "That damned reptile," shouted Hook, throwing his hat on the table. "And all because of that pestilent Peter Pan. Oh, if I could only get my hand on him." "Calm down, Captain," tried Smee, pouring himself a cup of tea. "You need some rest, sir. How about some music on your harpsichord?" Hook sat down heavily in his chair. but something caught his eye. "Smee," he said slowly, "did you go through my things?" Wendy's heart raced. The compass that John had examined was out of place, and some drawers weren't completely closed. "No, Captain, don't even go near your things, not me," replied Smee, confused. Hook stood up, his shrewd eyes scanning the cabin. "So we have visitors," he muttered, a cruel smile forming on his lips. "And I bet I know exactly who they are." The captain began to walk around the cabin, banging his hook against furniture and walls. As he approached the curtain where Wendy and her brothers were hiding, Michael couldn't hold back a sneeze. "Whoa!" exclaimed Hook, pulling back the curtain. At that moment, Peter Pan descended from the ceiling like a bolt of lightning, kicking off the captain's hat. "Now!" he shouted, and chaos ensued in the cabin. The Lost Boys jumped out of the trunk, throwing objects and making a mess. Tinker Bell flew in circles around Smee's head, disorientating him. Wendy, John, and Michael took advantage of the distraction to run to the cabin window. "Happy thought," reminded Peter, as he threw more fairy dust at them. The children began to float away, escaping through the window one by one. Hook, furious, tried to reach them with his hook. "Come back here, you little pests." "Smee, call the crew." Peter was the last to leave, but not without one last taunt. He took the captain's favorite hat and placed it on his own head, bowing mockingly. "See you later, old man," he laughed, flying out of the window. The escape was exciting, with the children flying in zigzags to dodge the shots of the pirates who had climbed onto the deck. The cannonballs exploded in the water around them, creating big splashes that got them wet, but nobody cared. They were all laughing at the adventure. When they finally reached their hiding place, they fell to the ground laughing and panting. John was still, holding the compass he had borrowed from the captain, and Michael was hugging his teddy bear that had almost been left behind in the confusion. "That was incredible," exclaimed Nibs, jumping up and down with excitement. Wendy, although she also found the adventure exciting, couldn't stop thinking about the captain's diary. There was more to Hook than met the eye, and she wondered if Peter knew the whole story. Night fell in Neverland, and the children gathered around a makeshift fire inside the hideout. Wendy began to tell stories, but this time she included one about a man who had lost his way and turned into something he had never planned to be. Peter watched from his special chair, made of intertwined branches, but his gaze was distant, as if he too was lost in thought about the past, or perhaps about the future he refused to have. The sound of the crocodile's clock echoed in the distance, mingling with the singing of mermaids and the tinkling of fairies, creating the nocturnal symphony characteristic of Neverland. As the children began to fall asleep, no one noticed a shadowy figure watching the hideout from afar through a telescope. Captain Hook had found his hideout, and a plan was beginning to form in his vengeful mind. The next morning, the hideout was bustling with preparations for a big treasure hunt that Peter had planned. He had discovered an old map in one of Captain Hook's trunks during his raid on the ship, and was eager to share the adventure with everyone. Wendy was organizing provisions for the journey, preparing small parcels with fruit and bread that the Lost Boys had borrowed from the Indian village. John studied the compass stolen from the pirate ship, determined to be the expedition's official navigator, while Michael helped the twins tie ropes and prepare makeshift backpacks with large sheets of paper. "The treasure is hidden beyond Skull Rock," explained Peter, pointing to the worn map. "We'll have to pass through Mermaid Lagoon and cross Indian Territory." Tinker Bell hovered over the map, her golden glow revealing secret markings that could only be seen with fairy light. She still maintained her protective attitude towards Peter, but had begun to tolerate Wendy's presence a little more, especially after the girl had sewn a little petal dress for her. The group set off at sunrise, with Peter leading the way through the air. The children alternated between flying and walking, saving the remaining fairy dust on their clothes. The first stop would be the Mermaid Lagoon, where they would need to get a special pearl, which, according to the map, was necessary to open the treasure chest. As they approached the lagoon, the group hid behind some rocks to watch the mermaids. They were beautiful creatures, but Wendy had already realized that their beauty hid a dangerous nature. The mermaids played with each other, combing their long, colorful hair with combs made of coral and singing mesmerizing melodies. "I'm going," whispered Wendy, surprising everyone. "They're more hostile towards boys, but maybe I can negotiate with them." Peter hesitated, but nodded, respecting Wendy's courage. She approached the water's edge, and the mermaids immediately noticed her. One of them, with aqua green hair and a crown of shells, swam closer. "An earth girl," said the mermaid, her voice melodious, but with a tone of disdain. "What do you want in our domain?" Wendy explained about the pearl, and to her surprise, the mermaids laughed. "Ah, yes, the magic pearl," said the crowned mermaid. "We can give it to you, but it comes at a price. We want to hear a story we've never heard before." Wendy smiled, for storytelling was her specialty. She began to tell a tale about a young mermaid who fell in love with a human prince, a story she had read at home before coming to Neverland. The mermaids were completely fascinated, having never heard a story about one of their kind. Enchanted by the narrative, they gave Wendy the pearl, a luminescent jewel that seemed to contain moonlight itself inside. With the first part of their mission accomplished, the group headed towards the Indians' territory. On the way, however, they began to notice strange signs, unnaturally broken branches, footprints that didn't belong to the island's animals, and an unsettling silence in the forest. Peter, his senses sharpened by life in Neverland, realized that something was wrong. "It's a trap," he whispered, signaling for everyone to stop. "Hook followed us here." He had barely finished speaking when nets fell over them, and pirates sprang up on all sides. Captain Hook emerged from the shadows, his hook glinting menacingly. "Well, well, well," he smiled mischievously. "Looks like my little plan worked perfectly. Did you really believe that map had been stolen? I let you find it?" The children struggled in their hammocks, while Tinker Bell flew around, frantically trying to find a way to help. Peter managed to free himself with his dagger, but before he could help the others, he had to fend off Hook's attacks. "This time, Pan, there's no escape," shouted the captain, engaging Peter in a sword duel. Wendy, remaining calm, realized that she still had the mermaid pearl in her pocket. Remembering the stories her mother used to tell her about magical objects, she squeezed the pearl tightly and made a wish. To everyone's amazement, the pearl began to shine brightly, and its glow attracted the attention of the nearby mermaids. The aquatic creatures, feeling connected to their magical pearl, emerged from the lagoon and began to sing. Their music was different now, not to attract, but to confuse and disorient the pirates. The sailors, affected by the melody, began to stagger and drop their weapons, giving the children a chance to free themselves from the nets. Even Captain Hook seemed momentarily stunned, allowing Peter to gain the upper hand in the duel. Now, shouted Peter, and all those who still had enough fairy dust took off. Those who couldn't fly were carried by the others, forming a curious aerial chain that moved quickly away from danger. Hook, recovering from the effect of the siren's music, shouted orders to his disoriented crew, but it was too late. The group was far enough away, although they could hear the captain's furious shouts echoing across the island. They landed in a safe clearing, all panting, but laughing at the adventure and danger they had just escaped. Wendy held the pearl with even more affection, now realizing that its magic was more powerful than they had imagined. "You were amazing," Peter exclaimed to Wendy, with a genuine admiration that made Tinker Bell tinkle with renewed jealousy. But the adventure wasn't over yet. The map, although it had been Hook's trap, had revealed something real through Tinker Bell's light ancient markings that indicated a real treasure, one that Captain Hook himself didn't know about. As the sun began to set on Neverland, the group prepared for the next stage of their adventure. Now, with the magic pearl in their possession and knowledge of the map's true markings, they were closer than ever to discovering one of the island's greatest secrets. With the secret map markings revealed by Tinker Bell's light, the group headed towards the snowy mountains of Neverland. The real treasure, according to ancient inscriptions, was hidden in a cave near the highest peak. Peter led the way occasionally, stopping to help the others climb more difficult sections. "It's colder up here," observed Michael, hugging his teddy bear tighter. Wendy, ever attentive, improvised scarves with large soft leaves they had brought from the forest. As they climbed, the tropical vegetation gave way to rocks covered in snow and ice. The magical pearl in Wendy's possession emitted a soft glow that seemed more intense as they neared the top, as if responding to the proximity of something equally magical. John, consulting the stolen compass, noticed something strange. "The needle is spinning nonstop," he said, frowning, as if there was some kind of powerful magnetic force nearby. The Lost Boys, who would normally be the first to complain after a long walk, were unusually quiet and determined. There was something in the air, a feeling that they were about to discover something truly extraordinary. When they finally reached the entrance to the cave, indicated on the map, they were greeted by an astonishing sight. Crystals of every possible color grew from the walls, creating a spectacle of light and color. As Tinker Bell flew between them, in the center of the cave, there was an ice pedestal with an ancient chest. "That's it," exclaimed Peter, flying up to the pedestal. But when he tried to open the chest, he discovered that it was sealed by some kind of ancient magic. "The pearl," reminded Wendy. "That must be why we needed it." When Wendy brought the pearl close to the lock on the chest, something extraordinary happened. The crystals in the cave began to pulsate with a light of their own, and an ethereal voice filled the room. "To open this true treasure, everyone must offer something precious, not of material value, but from the heart." The children looked at each other, confused at first, but gradually understanding the meaning of those words. One by one, they began to make their offerings. Michael was the first, placing his beloved teddy bear on the pedestal. John offered the compass, not for the object itself, but for what it represented his search for direction and knowledge. The Lost Boys offered small mementos they kept from their lives before Neverland: a shiny button, a faded photo, a small spinning top. Wendy hesitated for a moment before offering something she always carried with her: a small thimble her mother had given her, a symbol of the family love she had left behind. Tinker Bell, surprising everyone, offered some of her own fairy scales, which shone like shooting stars. Peter Pan was the last. He hovered over the pedestal, struggling internally with something that seemed difficult to express. Finally, he took from his neck a necklace made of simple cord from which hung a small, rusty key. "It's the key to my house," he explained, his voice trembling slightly. "The house I left so long ago, when I decided never to grow up." When the last offering was made, the whole cave began to glow, and the chest slowly opened. Inside, there was no gold or jewels, but something much more valuable: memories. Memories crystallized in the form of light, showing precious moments in the lives of each one of them. They saw their families, their homes, moments of joy and even sadness that they had forgotten or chosen to ignore. For the Lost Boys, it was the first time in years that they could clearly remember where they came from. For Wendy, John, and Michael, it was a painful but necessary reminder of the love they had left behind. Peter watched everything with an expression that mixed fascination and fear. For the first time, he could clearly see his own memories: a mother waiting with the window open night after night, waiting for the return of the son who had chosen to fly away. It was at that moment that a familiar sound broke the spell of the moment: the clang of swords and pirate shouts echoing across the mountain. Captain Hook had followed in their footsteps in the snow. "He never gives up," sighed Nibs, preparing for another fight. But something had changed. The memories they had witnessed brought new understanding, especially for Wendy. She remembered Hook's diary, the words that revealed a lost man, not unlike the children who refused to grow up. "Wait," she said, holding Peter's arm as he drew his dagger. Maybe there's another way." When Hook and his men burst into the cave, they found not a group in battle position, but children standing around a chest of lights. Wendy stepped forward, holding the mermaid pearl. "Captain," she called, "there's something you need to see." The light of memories enveloped Hook, showing him not only his past as a respected explorer, but also the exact moment when he let bitterness transform his heart. It was a choice he had made, just as Peter had chosen never to grow up, just as each of them had made their own choices. Neverland, they finally understood, was not just a place to escape from growing up, but a place to understand that growing up didn't mean losing magic. It meant learning to carry it in a new way. The last lights of the day penetrated the cave, entrance painting everyone in golden hues. At that moment, suspended between childhood and what was to come, each of them faced a choice: to remain forever in the shadows of what they had been, or to take a step towards what they could become. And so, in Neverland, where time worked in mysterious ways and magic was in every breath, a new story began to be written, no longer about never growing up, but about growing up in the right way, carrying with them the precious memories of childhood like a treasure, more valuable than all the pirates' gold